My daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye, across a table full of roast turkey and expensive wine, and told me I was trouble. She said, "Winston, you are just trouble, and you are not welcome at the lake house for Christmas this year. I need that space for important people." I did not yell. I did not flip the table. I just wiped my mouth with a napkin, stood up, and walked out into the cold Chicago night. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my office, eating canned soup and watching the snow fall. But at 1 minute past midnight, my phone rang. It was my son, Derek. He was screaming, "Dad, why are there news vans on the lawn? Dad, why is your face on the Fox News ticker? What on earth have you done?" They were frozen in horror. I was just sitting back in my leather chair, taking a sip of aged bourbon. They wanted trouble, so I gave them the kind of trouble that makes the national headlines. Before I tell you how I legally evicted my own son and his wife from a multi-million-dollar property they thought they owned, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by people who should have respected you. My name is Winston Carter, but back in the day, the guys on the construction sites called me the Hawk. I earned that name because nothing happened on my job sites without me seeing it. I spent 40 years laying the underground fiber optic cables that power half of Chicago. I have poured more concrete and welded more rebar than most men have eaten hot dinners. I made my money in the dirt, in the dark, and in the cold. I retired with 7 figures in the bank and a portfolio of properties that are shielded behind so many LLCs that even the IRS has to squint to see who owns what. But to my daughter-in-law Tiffany, I was just a retired old black man in a flannel shirt who smelled like Old Spice and sawdust. I was an embarrassment. It started last month at Thanksgiving. Derek and Tiffany had invited me over to their place in the suburbs. I say their place, but the down payment came from a check I wrote in 2015. The renovations came from a crew I sent over and paid in cash. Tiffany opened the door wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. She did not hug me. She just looked at my boots and frowned. "Winston," she said, "please take those off. We have guests coming, important guests." I took off my boots. I am 72 years old. My back hurts when I bend over, but I did not complain. I placed my boots on the mat and walked into the living room in my socks. The house was full of people I did not know. Young people. People who work in marketing and real estate and talk about their personal brands. Tiffany is a real estate agent. She sells high-end condos to people who have more money than sense. She was holding a glass of champagne and holding court in the center of the room. I walked over to say hello to my son. Derek looked tired. He is a good boy, or he used to be. But since he married Tiffany, he looks like a man who is constantly waiting for a bomb to go off. He hugged me quickly, patting my back. "Hey, Dad," he whispered. "Try to keep a low profile tonight. Tiffany is trying to close a deal with that guy over there." I looked. It was a man in a blue suit who looked like he had never held a shovel in his life. I nodded and went to the kitchen to get myself a glass of water. They did not offer me a drink. I stood by the island watching them. I have spent my life reading blueprints. I know how to look at a structure and tell you where the load-bearing walls are. And I know how to look at a marriage and tell you where the cracks are. This marriage was crumbling. I could see it in the way Derek flinched every time Tiffany laughed too loud. Dinner was served an hour late. The turkey was dry, but the wine kept flowing. Tiffany sat at the head of the table, not Derek. She started talking about the house. She was telling the man in the blue suit about the architecture. She said we designed this open floor plan ourselves. It was such a struggle to get the contractors to understand our vision. She sighed, acting like a martyr. I cleared my throat. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, "the contractors did not want to remove that wall because it supports the second-floor master bathroom. If they had done what you asked, the bathtub would have fallen into the kitchen. I had to come over here and draw the steel beam reinforcement myself." The table went silent. Tiffany turned her head slowly. Her eyes were cold. "Excuse me," she said. "I am talking to a client, Winston, and I do not remember you having an architecture degree. You were a contractor. You dig holes." "I did not dig holes, Tiffany," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I own the company that digs the holes, and I paid for the steel beam that is keeping your roof from collapsing on your head right now." Derek dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Dad, please," he hissed. Tiffany stood up. Her face was red. She did not care about the guests anymore. Her mask slipped. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "This is exactly why we cannot take you anywhere," she snapped. "You always have to be the smartest person in the room. You always have to bring up money. You are just trouble, Winston. You are a walking, talking cloud of negativity." I put my napkin on the table. I looked at my son. He was staring at his plate, studying the green beans like they held the secrets of the universe. He was not going to defend me. I knew it then. My heart broke a little, but my face did not show it. The hawk does not show pain. Then, Tiffany dropped the bomb. She took a sip of her wine and smiled a cruel, thin smile. "You know what?" she said. "I was going to wait, but I will say it now. Do not bother coming to the lake house for Christmas." The room went dead silent. The lake house, my sanctuary. The place in Wisconsin I bought 30 years ago when nobody wanted land up there. The place where my late wife Althea planted her hydrangeas. The place where I taught Derek how to fish. Tiffany continued enjoying her power. "I have invited some very exclusive clients up there for the holidays. We are hosting a winter gala. It is going to be high-end, sophisticated. And honestly, Winston, you just would not fit in. You would probably sit in the corner in that flannel shirt and tell everyone how you fixed the plumbing. It is embarrassing. So stay home, watch TV. We will send you a card." She looked at her guests and laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "You know how it is with the elderly. They get so confused and grumpy." I stood up slowly. My knees popped, but I stood tall. I am 6'2". I cast a shadow over Tiffany. I looked at Derek one last time. "Are you okay with this, son?" I asked. Derek looked up, tears in his eyes, but he nodded. "Listen to Tiffany, Dad. She knows best. It is for business." Business. That was the word that triggered me. They thought this was business. They had no idea who they were dealing with. To them, I was just an old ATM machine that was starting to malfunction. They did not know that the lake house was not theirs. They did not know that the deed was not in their names. I had let them use it. I had let them play house, but I never signed it over. I walked to the front door, put on my boots, and walked out. The cold air felt good. It felt like truth. I got into my truck, a 20-year-old Ford that runs like a clock, and I sat there for a moment. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was not angry anymore. I was focused. It was the same feeling I used to get right before we detonated a charge to clear bedrock. Controlled. Dangerous. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was an old flip phone. I hate smartphones. I dialed a number I had not called in 2 years. It rang twice. "Hello?" a gravelly voice answered. "Rosenbaum here. It is Winston," I said. There was a pause, then a chuckle. "The hawk. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "It is late, Winston. I need you to open the file on the Lake Geneva property," I said. "The one under the Althea Legacy, LLC. "Is everything okay?" Rosenbaum asked. His tone shifted from friendly to professional instantly. "No," I said. "Everything is not okay. They called me Trouble, Saul. They told me I am not welcome in my own house." I heard the sound of a chair squeaking as Rosenbaum sat up. "What do you want to do? Do you want to send a warning letter?" I looked back at the house. Through the window I could see Tiffany laughing. She was toasting with her champagne glass. She looked like she had just won the lottery. She had no idea she was standing on a trap door. "No warning letter," I said. "I want to go nuclear. Prepare the eviction notices. And Saul, check the title. I have a feeling she is trying to do something stupid." "I will check it right now," Rosenbaum said. "Give me 5 minutes." I drove home in silence. My house is in a quiet neighborhood. It is small, brick, solid. I built it myself. I walked into my home office and turned on my computer. I do not use social media, but I know how to use the internet. I went to Zillow. I typed in the address of the lake house. My heart stopped. There it was, my house, my memories, listed for sale, $4 million. The listing description said, "Rare opportunity, motivated seller, immediate possession available." I stared at the screen. Motivated seller. I was not selling. My phone rang. It was Rosenbaum. "Winston," he said, and his voice was low. "You were right to call. I just pulled the county records digitally. There is a pending transfer application. Someone forged your signature on a power of attorney document last week. They are not just rude, Winston. They are felons." I leaned back in my chair. The rage that had been boiling in my gut suddenly turned into ice. This was not a family dispute anymore. This was fraud. Tiffany was not just banning me from Christmas. She was stealing my legacy. She was trying to sell my past to pay for her future. She thinks I am trouble, I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the picture of Althea on my desk. She was smiling, holding a prize-winning hydrangea from that garden by the lake. She told me once, "Winston, you are a gentle man, but you are a terrible enemy." "Rosenbaum," I said into the phone, "do not stop the sale." "What?" Rosenbaum sounded confused. "Winston, they are stealing your house." "No," I said. "Let them think they are selling it. Let them invite their buyer. Let them have their party. I want them to feel like they have won. I want them to stand at the top of the mountain. Because the fall will kill them." The drive back to my townhouse was a 40-minute journey into the past. I drove my old Ford F-150 with the cracked leather seats and the radio that only catches AM stations when it rains. I drove away from the manicured lawns of the suburbs where my son lives a life he cannot afford, and back toward the city, back to the neighborhood where real people live. My townhouse isn't a mansion. It is a solid brick structure on the south side that I bought in 1982. It has burglar bars on the lower windows and a small patch of grass that I cut myself every Saturday morning. To Tiffany, this house is a dump. She refuses to park her leased Mercedes in front of it because she says it ruins her aesthetic. But she doesn't know that inside this house is where the real power lies. She doesn't know that the floorboards in my home office are hiding a safe that contains the deeds to half the commercial buildings on 47th Street. I unlocked my front door, and the smell of home hit me. It smells like cedar wood and pipe tobacco, and the lavender potpourri Althea used to make. It was quiet, a good kind of quiet. Not the tense silence of my son's house where everyone is walking on eggshells. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. I didn't drink it right away. I just held the glass and looked at the calendar on the wall. It was still on October. I hadn't turned the page. Althea used to handle the calendar. She marked everyone's birthdays in red ink. She never missed a date. Now the dates were just empty squares. I walked into my study. This is the room where I built my empire. There is a drafting table in the corner where I designed the fiber optic grid for the downtown loop. There are filing cabinets that are locked with padlocks that would confuse a safecracker. I sat down in my leather chair and listened to the leather creak. It was time to make the call. I picked up the landline. I don't trust cell phones for serious business. I dialed a number I know by heart. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "Rosenbaum speaking." "It is me, Saul," I said. "Winston, it is late. You sound sober, which worries me. What happened at the dinner?" "They kicked me out, Saul. They told me I am not welcome at the lake house for Christmas. Tiffany said I am trouble." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Saul Rosenbaum has been my lawyer for 30 years. He is a short, angry man who smokes cheap cigars and knows more about property law than any judge in Illinois. We made a lot of money together in the 90s, buying distressed properties and flipping them before gentrification was even a word. "She kicked you out of your own house," Saul asked, his voice rising. "Does she know?" "She knows nothing," I said, taking a sip of the bourbon. "She thinks the lake house is just the family vacation home. She thinks it belongs to Derek and her because I let them use it every summer. She thinks because I stopped going up there after Althea died that I abandoned it." "She is a fool," Winston Saul said. "That property is the crown jewel of the Althea Legacy LLC. You are the sole managing member. They are just guests with a very generous landlord. I know that, Saul. You know that. But they don't know that. And tonight I got a feeling, a bad feeling. The kind I used to get when a trench was about to collapse. She was talking to a man in a blue suit, a developer type. She was showing him photos of the lake view on her phone. Saul breathed out heavily. I can hear him lighting a cigar. "What do you want me to do?" "Check the listings," I said. "Check Zillow, check Redfin, check the MLS. If she is talking to developers, she might have done something stupid." "Hold on," Saul said. I hear the clicking of his mechanical keyboard. He types like he is angry at the keys. I waited. I looked at the framed photo on my desk. It was taken 10 years ago at the lake house. Althea was sitting on the dock, her feet in the water, laughing at something Derek had said. Derek was smiling back at her. He looked happy then. He looked like my son. not this hollow shell of a man who lets his wife humiliate his father for sport. My God, Winston Saul's voice cut through my memories. What is it? You need to sit down. I am sitting, Saul. Tell me. It is listed. It went live 3 hours ago. $4 million. The listing agent is Tiffany Carter, luxury real estate. My hand tightened around the glass. The bourbon rippled. $4 million. That was a lot of money. Enough to pay off her debts. Enough to buy a new life. Enough to erase me. Read me the description, Saul, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Rare opportunity to own a historic lakefront estate, Saul read. Motivated seller. Owner is elderly and relocating to assisted living. Immediate possession available upon closing. Cash offers preferred. I felt a cold fire spread through my chest. Elderly. Relocating to assisted living. She wasn't just selling my house. She was selling a narrative. She was telling the world I was senile and on my way to a nursing home. How is this possible, Saul? I asked. The deed is in the LLC. She cannot sell what she does not own. She uploaded a document to the listing supplements, Saul said. I am looking at it now. It is a power of attorney, signed by Winston Carter. Notarized by, let me see, a notary in her office. I closed my eyes. I have not signed a power of attorney since 1998. It was a forgery, a clumsy, desperate forgery. They were betting on me being too old to notice. They were betting on me dying before I figured it out. Or maybe they planned to use the money to actually put me in a home and keep me quiet with heavy medication. It happens. I have seen it happen to guys I used to work with. Their kids get greedy and suddenly the old man is declared incompetent. This is a felony, Winston, Saul said. This is fraud. This is grand larceny. I can have the sheriff at her door in an hour. We can have her license revoked by morning. Say the word. I wanted to say the word. I wanted to hear the sirens. I wanted to see the handcuffs click around her wrists while her high society friends watched. But then I looked at Althea's picture again. If I stopped it now, they would play the victim. Tiffany would cry. She would say it was a misunderstanding. She would say she was just trying to help me manage my assets because I was getting confused. Derek would back her up because he is scared of her. And I would just be the angry old man who ruined their business deal. No, I said. No, Saul shouted. Winston, are you crazy? She is selling your house. Let her sell it, I said. Let her think she sold it. Winston, explain yourself. If we stop her now, it is just a family dispute, I said, standing up and walking to the window. I looked out at the streetlights flickering on the wet pavement. But if she takes a deposit, if she signs a contract, if she accepts money from a buyer, then it is a completed crime. Then there is no way out. You want to trap her? Saul asked quietly. I want to destroy her entitlement, Saul. I want to burn the bridge so thoroughly that she can never cross back over it. She wants a Christmas party at the lake house. She wants to show off for her rich friends. Fine. Let her have the party. Let her invite the buyer. Let her pop the champagne. You are a cold son of a gun, Winston, Saul said, but I could hear the admiration in his voice. This is risky. If the title company is lazy, it might slip through. That is why you are going to call the title company tomorrow morning, I said. You are going to put a quiet lien on the property. Nothing that shows up on a standard search, but something that stops the final transfer dead in its tracks. Let her do the song and dance. Let her take the man's money. And then when the clock strikes midnight on Christmas, I let the sentence hang in the air. You want to pull the rug out? Saul finished. I don't just want to pull the rug, Saul. I want to pull the foundation. I want the whole house of cards to come down while they are standing inside it. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. It was the same feeling I had 40 years ago when I bid on the city contract against the big white firms. They laughed at me then. They said the black man from Alabama didn't have the capital. They didn't know I had been saving every dime since I was 16. I crushed them then, and I was going to crush Tiffany now. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled down a thick binder. It was the original construction logs for the lake house. I opened it to the page where I sketched the electrical schematics. I designed that house to be smart before smart homes were a trend. I wired every room. I installed hidden speakers in the walls. I put automated locks on the doors that could be controlled from a central server. And because I am paranoid about security, I kept a master override code. A code that bypasses everything. I sat back down at my computer and typed in the IP address for the lake house server. It asked for a password. I typed in ALTHEA1975. Access granted. The screen filled with camera feeds. I could see the living room. I could see the kitchen. I could see Tiffany and Derek. They were back at the lake house already. They must have driven up there straight after dinner. They were popping another bottle of wine. Tiffany was dancing around the living room, holding her phone up filming a selfie video. I turned up the volume on my computer speakers. "Guys," she was saying to her phone screen, "you are not going to believe this. We just listed the family estate. It is going to go so fast. Serious inquiries only. DM me for details. Hashtag lake life. Hashtag boss babe. Hashtag legacy." Legacy. She used that word. That was my word. I watched Derek. He was sitting on the sofa, my sofa, with his head in his hands. He looked sick. He knew this was wrong. He knew I wasn't senile, but he was too weak to stop it. He was letting her sell his mother's memory for a commission check. I leaned into the microphone on my computer, even though I hadn't activated the speakers in the house yet. "Enjoy it while it lasts, son," I whispered. I spent the next hour going through the digital files. I found the emails she had sent to the notary. I found the draft of the sales contract. She was selling it fully furnished. She was selling Althea's piano. She was selling my antique fishing rods. She was selling the quilts my grandmother made. She was selling everything as if it were just inventory. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. There is no room for tears in war. And this was war. They wanted to treat me like a liability, like a broken tool to be discarded. They were about to find out that I am not the tool. I am the demolition expert. I opened my email and sent a message to Saul. Subject: Operation Silent Night. Body: get the eviction notice ready, but date it for December 26th. I want them to have a very Merry Christmas first. I turned off the monitor, but I left the computer running. The blue light of the tower blinked in the darkness like a heartbeat. I went upstairs to my bedroom. It was simple: a bed, a dresser, a Bible on the nightstand. I knelt down to pray like I do every night. "Lord," I whispered, "I know you say vengeance is yours, but I am going to need to borrow it for just one night. I promise I will return it when I am done." I climbed into bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the wind rattle the window pane. I thought about the lake house. I thought about the winter of '96, when we got snowed in for 3 days. We ran out of firewood, so we burned old newspapers. We laughed and drank hot cocoa, and played cards by candlelight. Derek was 10 years old. He told me then, "Dad, I want to be just like you when I grow up, a builder." Somewhere along the way, he forgot how to build and learned how to steal. And that is my failure as much as it is his. But a father's job isn't just to provide. Sometimes a father's job is to correct, even if the correction breaks his heart. They called me Trouble. Well, trouble is coming to town. You do not work in the Chicago underground for 40 years without learning a few things about surveillance. When you are laying high-speed fiber optic cables beneath the city streets, you are essentially building the nervous system of the world. I know where the lines run. I know how the signals travel. And I know that information is the most valuable commodity on Earth. My son and his wife thought I was just an old man who spent his days watching the Weather Channel and complaining about his joints. They forgot that before I was a retiree, I was a contractor who managed multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects. They forgot that I used to have to record every site meeting and every negotiation to protect myself from corrupt city officials and shady developers. I still have my equipment. In the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, underneath a stack of tax returns from 1999, I keep a small black Pelican case. Inside is a long-range acoustic device and a magnetic GPS tracker with audio relay. It is old technology by today's standards. It does not use the cloud. It does not need Wi-Fi. It uses a radio frequency that most modern scanners do not even check anymore. It is reliable, just like me. The morning after I found the listing on Zillow, I drove over to Derek's house. I knew they would be at work. Tiffany likes to post her schedule on Instagram, so the whole world knows how busy she is. She was showing a penthouse in the Gold Coast at 10. Derek was at his office downtown. The house would be empty. But I did not need to go inside the house. I needed to get to the car. I have a spare key to Derek's SUV. I paid for the car after all. It was a graduation gift when he finished his MBA. I parked my truck down the block and walked up the driveway. I moved quickly. My knees were aching, but adrenaline is a powerful painkiller. I unlocked the SUV and slid into the driver's seat. It smelled like Tiffany's perfume, a sickly sweet floral scent that tried too hard to be expensive. I reached under the dashboard on the passenger side. I found the OBD port and zip-tied the small black box behind the wiring harness. It was invisible unless you were a mechanic looking for it. I flipped the switch to activate the voice trigger. It would start recording the moment anyone spoke inside the vehicle and beam the audio directly to the receiver in my truck. I locked the car and walked away. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. The hawk strikes fast. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting in my truck parked in the lot of a Walmart 2 miles away. I had my receiver plugged into the auxiliary jack of my stereo. I waited. Surveillance is 90% boredom and 10% heartbreak. I ate a sandwich I had packed. I watched people come and go. I wondered where I had gone wrong with Derek. Was I too hard on him? Was I too soft? Did I give him too much too soon? At 5:30, the receiver crackled to life. I heard the heavy thud of a car door closing. Then another. I heard the engine start. So did the buyer sign the offer? Tiffany's voice came through clear as a bell. She sounded stressed. "He is thinking about it," Derek said. His voice was low. "He is worried about the title. He asked why Dad is not at the closing if he is the seller." I gripped the steering wheel. Here it was. The truth. "You need to handle him, Derek," Tiffany snapped. "You need to tell him that your father is mentally unfit to travel. Tell him we have the power of attorney because of his dementia." "God, Derek, do I have to do everything?" "I don't like lying, Tiff," Derek said. "He sounds sharp. He called me last week and asked about the football game. He remembers the score. He is not senile. He is 72 years old," Tiffany yelled. The audio spiked, and I had to turn the volume down. "He is confusing things. He thinks he owns the world, but he is just a retired laborer living in a dump. Listen to me. We have $70,000 in credit card debt. The lease on my car is up next month. If we do not sell that lake house, we are underwater. Do you understand? We are drowning." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. $70,000 in credit card debt. I had no idea. They drove new cars. They wore designer clothes. They went on vacations to Tulum and Paris. It was all a lie. It was all financed on plastic. "So what is the plan?" Derek asked. "Let's say we sell it. We get the $4 million. Then what? Dad is going to notice eventually. He might drive up there in the spring." Tiffany laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "By spring, Winston will be where he belongs." "Where is that?" Derek asked. "I found a place," Tiffany said. "It is a state facility over in Gary, Indiana. It is fully subsidized, so it won't cost us a dime of the sale money. It is secure. They specialize in difficult geriatric cases. Once we have the money, we declare him incompetent. We put him in there. He won't have a phone. He won't have a car. He will just be another old man staring at the wall, and we will be free." I stopped breathing. The air in my truck felt thin. A state facility in Gary. I knew the kind of places she was talking about. Warehouses for the forgotten. Places where the smell of urine never leaves the hallways, and the staff are overworked and underpaid. She wasn't just planning to steal my money. She was planning to steal my freedom. She was planning to bury me alive. Derek was silent for a long time. I prayed. "Lord, let him speak up. Let him say no. Let him say you cannot do that to my father. He is the man who taught me to ride a bike. He is the man who sat by my bed when I had pneumonia." But Derek just sighed. "Make sure it is clean," he said. "I don't want any legal trouble." I turned off the receiver. I pulled the headphones off my ears and threw them onto the passenger seat. I felt like I was going to vomit. My own son, my flesh and blood. He didn't just agree to the theft, he agreed to the disposal of his father. He chose his wife's debt over my life. I sat there for 20 minutes staring at the Walmart sign. I watched a mother holding her little boy's hand as they walked to their car. She was fixing his coat, making sure he was warm. That used to be me and Derek. What happened to us? Then the sadness evaporated. It was replaced by something else. Something colder, something harder. It was the feeling of steel hardening. If they wanted to treat me like a business transaction, then I would show them how I do business. and I have never lost a negotiation. I started the truck and drove straight to the bank. It was almost closing time, but the branch manager knows me. I have been banking with First National since 1985. Mr. Carter, the manager said when I walked in, "You look serious today. I need access to my safety deposit box, the large one, and I need to see the manager of the wire transfer department." "Right this way, sir." I walked into the vault. The air was cool and smelled of dust and money. I inserted my key into box number 402. The manager turned his key and slid the long metal box out. He left me alone in the private viewing room. I opened the lid. Inside was my life's work, not the money. The money is in accounts. This was the leverage. There were the original deeds to the lake house, the real ones, not the forgeries Tiffany had. There were the patent documents for the fiber optic coupling system I invented in '92, the patent that still pays me royalties every quarter. And there were the incorporation papers for Althea Legacy LLC. I took everything out. I put the papers into my leather satchel. Then I reached into the back of the box. There was a velvet pouch. Inside was a diamond ring. It was Althea's engagement ring. I had been saving it. I had foolishly thought that one day, if Tiffany straightened up, or if Derek found a better woman, I would pass it down. I looked at the diamond sparkling under the fluorescent lights. It was pure, flawless, just like Althea's love had been. "I am not leaving this for them," I whispered. I put the ring in my pocket. I closed the empty box and shoved it back into the slot. It made a hollow metal sound. I walked out to the lobby. "I want to restructure my accounts," I told the manager. "Certainly, Mr. Carter. What are we looking to do?" "I want to move the liquidity," I said. "Move the cash from the joint access accounts I have with my son. All of it." The manager typed on his computer. He frowned. "That is a significant amount, sir. The savings, the investment dividends, that is nearly $800,000. If you move it, the standing orders for your son's mortgage assistance will bounce." "Let them bounce," I said. "Mr. Carter, are you sure?" I leaned over the desk. I looked him in the eye. The hawk was watching him. "My son is a grown man," I said. "It is time he learned to pay his own bills. Move the money to the holding company account, the one that requires 2 signatures, mine and my lawyer's." "Done," the manager said. I walked out of the bank as the sun was setting. The city looked different to me now. It wasn't just buildings and streets, it was a battlefield. I patted the satchel on the passenger seat. I had my ammunition. They wanted to put me in a home in Gary. They wanted to erase Winston Carter. I drove toward the highway. I wasn't going home yet. I had one more stop to make. I needed to visit the hardware store. Not for tools, but for locks. High-grade industrial padlocks. The kind we used to use to secure the heavy machinery at night. If Tiffany thought she was selling my house, she was in for a surprise. But first I was going to let her dig her hole a little deeper. I was going to let her spend that imaginary $4 million in her head. I was going to let her feel safe. Because the only thing worse than losing everything is losing everything right when you think you have won it all. I turned on the radio. B.B. King was playing. The thrill is gone. Yes, I thought. The thrill is gone, but the reckoning has just begun. My son picked me up at 9 in the morning in his shiny SUV. He did not come to the door to walk me down the path. He just sat in the driveway and honked twice. That is the new language of respect in my family. 2 honks mean, "Get moving, old man." I walked out slowly. I made sure to shuffle my feet a little more than usual. I buttoned my flannel shirt all the way to the top, even though it was choking me. I needed to look the part. I needed to look like a man whose world had shrunk down to the size of a pill organizer. When I climbed into the passenger seat, Derek did not look at me. He was staring at his phone, typing furiously. He smelled of nervous sweat and too much coffee. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled without looking up. "We have to make a quick stop before I drop you back off. Just some paperwork for your insurance. Tiffany set it up. It is to make sure you are covered for, everything." I looked at him. My boy. The boy I taught to throw a spiral in the backyard. The boy I watched graduate from college with tears in my eyes. Now he was lying to my face with the ease of a used car salesman. He could not even look me in the eye. That is the thing about betrayal. It makes cowards out of decent men. "That sounds good, son," I said, making my voice crack just a little. "My eyes have been bothering me. The cataracts, Everything is a bit blurry these days." Derek finally looked at me. I saw relief wash over his face. He bought it. He believed the hawk was blind. Good. We drove into the city, but we did not go to a hospital or an insurance agency. We pulled into the parking garage of a glass and steel building downtown. It was one of those soulless places that house 100 different firms that charge by the hour to help rich people stay rich and poor people stay poor. We took the elevator to the 14th floor. The sign on the door said Miller and Associates. It did not say anything about health insurance. Tiffany was already there. She was sitting in the conference room looking like she owned the building. She was wearing a sharp white blazer and tapping her long manicured fingernails on the polished mahogany table. Sitting next to her was a man I assumed was Miller. He was young, too young. He wore a suit that was too tight and a watch that was too big. He looked like a shark that hadn't learned how to hunt yet. Winston, Tiffany said, not bothering to stand up. "You are late. We have a schedule." "Traffic was bad," I said, lowering myself into the chair slowly. I gripped the armrests like I was afraid of falling. "Is this the doctor?" The young lawyer chuckled. It was a dry, condescending sound. "No, Mr. Carter. I am Mr. Miller. I am helping your family with some estate planning. Just some routine documents to ensure your assets are protected for your medical care." "Medical care?" I repeated. I looked around the room. I squinted my eyes. "So this will pay for my eyes?" "Exactly," Tiffany cut in. She slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "Just sign where the little sticky notes are, Winston. We don't have all day." I looked at the papers. I didn't need glasses to read them. I have read contracts in the dim light of a tunnel at 3 in the morning. I know what a quitclaim deed looks like. I know what an irrevocable power of attorney looks like. And I saw the words right there in bold print at the top of the page. Transfer of deed, Lake Geneva property. They were not just signing me up for insurance. They were stripping me bare. They were taking the lake house out of the LLC and transferring it directly to a trust controlled by Tiffany. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. They were dirty. I had smudged them with butter earlier, on purpose. I put them on and leaned over the paper. I moved my finger slowly across the lines, pretending to read. "It is a lot of words," I said. "It is standard legal jargon," Dad Derek said. His leg was bouncing under the table. "Just sign it so we can go." I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. The lawyer watched me like a hawk watching a field mouse. Tiffany was practically vibrating with anticipation. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. The moment she won. My hand started to shake. I have a slight tremor in real life, but today I amplified it. I let the pen hover over the signature line. The tip of the pen danced around the paper, making little ink dots but never touching the line. "Here, let me help you," the lawyer said, reaching out to steady my hand. I pulled my hand back. "I can do it," I snapped, playing the stubborn old man. "I have been signing checks since before you were born, Sonny." Tiffany sighed loudly. She rolled her eyes so far back I thought they would get stuck. "Just sign the damn paper, Winston." I leaned in closer. My nose was almost touching the document. "Is this an 8 or a 3? I asked, pointing to a random paragraph. "It does not matter what number it is," Tiffany hissed. "It is just a formality. Sign." I looked at Derek. He was looking out the window. He could not watch. He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he was too weak to stop it. He was letting his wife steer the ship straight into the rocks. I felt a sudden wave of thirst. There was a carafe of coffee on the table and some porcelain cups. I reached out with my shaking hand. "I need a drink," I said. "My throat is dry." I grabbed the cup. But I didn't grab it by the handle. I grabbed it by the rim. My fingers slipped. I made sure they slipped. The cup tipped over. It wasn't a splash. It was a flood. Dark, hot coffee poured across the table. It flowed like a river of black oil. It soaked into the expensive mahogany. And more importantly, it soaked right into the stack of documents. The white paper turned brown and soggy in seconds. The ink started to run. The signature line dissolved into a black puddle. "Oh my God," Tiffany shrieked. She jumped up, knocking her chair over. Her white blazer had a splash of coffee on the sleeve. "You clumsy old fool. Look what you did." I sat there blinking behind my dirty glasses. I held my hands up in mock surrender. "I am sorry," I said. The cup. It was slippery. The lawyer was frantically trying to save the papers, but it was too late. They were a soggy mess. You cannot file a legal document that looks like it has been dipped in a mud puddle. We have to reprint them, the lawyer said, looking annoyed. He dabbed at his suit with a napkin. It will take me 20 minutes to redraft everything and get the notary back in here. She just left for lunch. 20 minutes, Tiffany screamed. We don't have 20 minutes. I have a lunch meeting with the investors at 12. She turned on me. Her face was twisted in ugly rage. The mask of the sophisticated businesswoman was gone. Beneath it was just a greedy child throwing a tantrum. You did that on purpose, she accused. I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes. I am an old man, Tiffany. My hands shake. You know that. That is why you want to put me in a home, right? Because I am a danger to myself. She stared at me. For a second, I thought she saw through me. I thought she saw the spark of intelligence in my eyes, but her arrogance blinded her. She could not believe that Winston the Digger could outsmart her. She only saw what she wanted to see, a useless, broken appliance. Fine, she spat. We don't have time for this today. She grabbed her purse. Derek, clean this up. Take him home. She leaned over the table, getting right in my face. Her breath smelled of peppermint and malice. You are lucky, Winston. You are very lucky. But don't think you got away with it. After Christmas, I am coming over to your house personally, and you are going to sign these papers if I have to guide your hand myself. She straightened up and brushed the imaginary dust off her shoulder. And since you are so clumsy, do not bother coming to the lake house. I was serious. Stay home. Watch your game shows. Don't call us. Don't send gifts. Just stay out of my way. She stormed out of the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like gunshots. The lawyer sighed and gathered the soggy papers, throwing them into the trash bin. I watched them go into the trash. The quitclaim deed, the power of attorney, the theft of my legacy, all sitting in a wastebasket covered in coffee grounds. Derek stood up. He looked exhausted. Come on, Dad, he said quietly. Let's go. I stood up. I didn't need to fake the groan this time. My hip really did hurt, but my spirit felt light. I had bought myself time. I had stalled the enemy. As we walked to the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the glass door. I saw an old man in a flannel shirt, but inside that old man was a warrior, sharpening his blade. I am sorry about the coffee, son, I said as the elevator doors closed. It is okay, Dad, Derek said, staring at the floor numbers. It was an accident. I smiled to myself. There are no accidents in construction, Derek. Every move is calculated. Every load is measured. And you just underestimated the structural integrity of your father. They sent me home to be alone for Christmas. They thought they had benched me, but they didn't know that the game wasn't over. The game had just begun. And while they were celebrating their victory, I was going to be preparing their defeat. I touched the pocket of my jacket. I could feel the cold, hard metal of the new padlock keys I had bought. Merry Christmas, Tiffany, I thought. I hope you like surprises, because I have got a big one coming down the chimney. Christmas Eve in Chicago is a specific kind of cold. It is a wind that starts somewhere out on the frozen surface of Lake Michigan and cuts right through the brick walls of the South Side. It rattles the window panes of my townhouse like a thief trying to find a way in. But inside, it was quiet. I sat at my small kitchen table, wearing my old wool cardigan, the one with the leather patches on the elbows that Tiffany tried to throw away 3 times. On the table in front of me was my Christmas dinner, a can of sliced peaches and heavy syrup, and a sleeve of saltine crackers. I could have ordered a steak. I could have gone to any 5-star restaurant in the city and bought the whole place out for the night. But tonight, I needed to remember where I came from. I needed to taste the struggle, because nothing sharpens your focus like the taste of poverty. I opened the can with my pocket knife. The metal scraped against metal, a harsh sound in the silent house. I took a bite of a peach slice. It was sweet and cold. It tasted like 1974. It tasted like the nights I slept in my truck because I couldn't afford a motel room near the job site. I ate slowly. I chewed every bite. I was fueling up for a fight. On the counter, my iPad was propped up against a sugar bowl. The screen was glowing with the blue light of a live stream. I had created a fake account named Investor88 to watch Tiffany's feed. She was live on Instagram, broadcasting from the great room of the lake house, my lake house. The camera panned around the room. I saw the 20-foot Christmas tree covered in gold ornaments. I saw the catering staff moving through the crowd with trays of champagne. I saw strangers wearing tuxedos and evening gowns, laughing and spilling drinks on the hardwood floors I had sanded by hand. Tiffany was in the center of it all, holding a microphone. She was wearing a red dress that glittered under the lights. She looked like a movie star. She looked like she owned the world. "Hello, everyone," she chirped into the camera, her voice high and fake. "Merry Christmas from our winter wonderland. We are so blessed to be surrounded by such amazing friends and potential partners tonight. This house has been in the family for years, but tonight we are celebrating new chapters. We are manifesting abundance. We are saying goodbye to the old and hello to the liquidity." She winked at the camera. "Goodbye to the old." That was me. I was the old she was saying goodbye to. She was toasting to my erasure. I watched Derek in the background. He was standing near the fireplace I built with river stones I hauled up from the bank myself. He was holding a glass of scotch, but he wasn't drinking it. He looked pale. He kept glancing at the front door like he was expecting the police, or maybe his conscience, to walk in. He looked small. My son is 6'1", but tonight he looked like a child wearing his father's suit. I took another cracker. I watched Tiffany pull a man into the frame. It was the man in the blue suit from Thanksgiving, Mr. X, the buyer. "And here is the man of the hour," she squealed, "the visionary who is going to take this property to the next level. We are just dotting the I's and crossing the T's tonight, folks. By tomorrow, this historic estate will have a new custodian." The man smiled a shark-like smile. He waved at the camera. He had no idea he was waving at the man who was about to ruin his night. He thought he was buying a mansion. He didn't know he was buying a lawsuit. I felt a tightness in my chest. It wasn't the heart condition Tiffany told everyone I had. It was rage. Pure, cold rage. I looked at that fireplace on the screen again, and suddenly I wasn't in my kitchen anymore. I was back there, 30 years ago. I closed my eyes and I could smell the wet mortar. I could feel the weight of the stones. Althea was there. She was sitting on a bucket wrapped in a blanket watching me work. It was late. We were tired. Our hands were raw. "Winston," she had said, her voice soft but strong as steel. "Why are you building this chimney so wide? It is too big for just us." "I am building it for the grandchildren, Althea," I had told her. "I am building it so strong that 100 years from now, when we are gone, the fire will still be burning. I am building a legacy, baby." Althea had stood up and walked over to me. She wiped a smudge of dirt off my cheek. She looked me in the eye. That look, the one that could strip a lie naked at 50 paces. "Build it strong, Winston," she said. "But listen to me. A legacy is only as good as the people who inherit it. If our boy grows up to be a man who respects the sweat, then give him the world. But if he grows up soft, if he grows up thinking this stone and this timber is his right, just because he carries your last name, then you burn it down." I stopped working. I looked at her. "Burn it down?" I asked. She nodded. "You burn it down, Winston. Do not leave money to hands that have never held a shovel. Do not leave a castle to a jester. It will destroy him. If he cannot respect the work, he does not deserve the reward. Promise me." I promised her. I kissed her forehead, and I promised her. I opened my eyes. The iPad screen was still flickering. Tiffany was laughing. Derek was hiding. The fire in the hearth was burning, but it wasn't warming the room. It was just a prop for their vanity. "I am keeping my promise, Althea," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "I am not burning it down with fire. I am burning it down with the truth." I pushed the empty can of peaches away. It was time. I stood up and walked into the living room. I turned on the television. I switched it to the local Fox News affiliate. The 10 o'clock news was just starting. The anchor was a woman with serious hair and a serious face. "Breaking news tonight," she said. "A Christmas miracle or a Christmas mystery? A prominent Chicago business figure has made a stunning donation that has the city buzzing. We will have the exclusive details coming up after the break." I smiled. The press release had gone out. Rosenbaum had timed it perfectly. The trap was set. The bait was taken. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I brought up the text thread with Saul Rosenbaum. My thumb hovered over the screen. I looked at the live stream one last time. Tiffany was raising a toast. "To the future," she yelled. "To the future," I repeated. I typed one word into the message box. "Execute." I hit send. The little bubble turned blue. Delivered. Somewhere in a server room in downtown Chicago, a digital command was sent. Somewhere in the county clerk's office, an automated filing system recorded a timestamp. And somewhere in the electrical grid of the lake house, a circuit breaker was receiving a command to trip. I sat back in my recliner. The old leather groaned. I folded my hands over my stomach. I was alone. I had no tree. I had no gifts. I had no family. But I had my dignity. And in a few minutes I was going to have the best show on television. I watched the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked. Tick, tick, tick. The live stream on the iPad suddenly froze. The image of Tiffany laughing, pixelated and distorted. Then the screen went black. A spinning wheel appeared. Connection lost. I chuckled, a low rumble that started in my chest. The lights just went out in Wisconsin, I said to the darkness. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from the smart home app. Alert. Main power disconnected. Generator override disabled. Security system resetting to factory defaults. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind howling outside. It sounded like the hawk screeching. "Merry Christmas, son," I whispered. Lesson number 1. You never fire the guy who knows where the wires are buried. I waited. The silence in the house was heavy now, heavy with anticipation. I knew what was happening up there. The panic, the confusion, the darkness. Tiffany screaming for someone to fix it. Mr. X checking his watch and wondering why he was doing business with amateurs. And then the phone rang. It was not Derek yet. It was too soon for Derek. It was an unknown number. I let it ring. I knew who it was. It was the security company monitoring the lake house. They were calling the primary account holder to report a power failure. I didn't answer. Let them sit in the dark for a while. Let them feel what it's like when the artificial light goes out and you have to face the reality of who you are. I turned the volume up on the TV. The commercial break was ending. The news anchor was back. "And now to our top story," she said. A shocker from the world of philanthropy. Sources confirm that the historic Carter estate on Lake Geneva, valued at over $4 million, has been officially transferred to the State Veterans Association as of 5 p.m. this evening. I leaned forward. The donor, she continued, is the reclusive infrastructure mogul Winston Carter. This donation comes as a surprise to many, including, it seems, his own family, who are rumored to be hosting a gala at the property this very evening. The screen flashed a picture. It was an old photo of me wearing a hard hat, pointing at a blueprint, the hawk in his prime. I took a deep breath. The first domino had fallen. The sound it made was beautiful. I picked up the can of peaches and drank the last of the syrup. It was sweet, so very sweet. I sat in the dark of my home office, illuminated only by the glow of 3 computer monitors. On the screens, I watched the party of the year unfold in the house that I built with my own 2 hands. It was like watching a movie where you know the ending, but the characters are still dancing toward the cliff. Tiffany had really outdone herself. The great room, which Althea and I had designed for family gatherings and quiet nights by the fire, was now filled with strangers. There were servers in black vests walking around with trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. There was a string quartet playing in the corner near the bay window, trying to be heard over the loud chatter of people who loved the sound of their own voices. I zoomed in on camera 4. It was positioned right above the mantel. It gave me a perfect view of Tiffany holding court. She was standing next to Mr. X, the man in the blue suit. His name I had learned from the hacked emails was Julian Sterling. He was a shark, a property developer from New York who bought historic homes, gutted them, and turned them into soulless luxury rentals. He was looking at my exposed beam ceiling, not with appreciation for the craftsmanship, but with the calculation of a butcher looking at a side of beef. I turned up the audio gain. The microphone I had hidden in the molding picked up their conversation as clearly as if I were standing right next to them. "It really is a magnificent structure," Julian was saying. He swirled his scotch in the crystal glass. My crystal glass. "The bones are incredible. You don't see timber framing like this anymore." Tiffany beamed. She touched his arm lightly, a gesture of false intimacy she used when she wanted something. "We have put so much love into this place," she lied. Her voice was smooth, like silk hiding a dagger. "But you know how it is, Julian. Lives change. We are looking to expand our horizons, spend more time in Europe. Keeping a place this size just for 2 people seems selfish." Julian took a sip of his drink. "And the title. You mentioned the owner of record is a trust, your father-in-law. I leaned forward in my chair. Here it comes, the pitch. Tiffany's face changed instantly. She put on a mask of deep sorrow. She lowered her voice to a tragic whisper. Oh, poor Winston. It has been so hard on us, Julian. He is not with us anymore. Not really. Julian raised an eyebrow. I thought you said he was relocating. He is, Tiffany said quickly. He is moving to a long-term care facility. But his mind, she tapped her temple sadly. The dementia has been aggressive. He doesn't know where he is half the time. He thinks it is 1980. He thinks he is still a construction worker. It is heartbreaking, really. We finally had to make the hard decision to take control of his affairs. For his own safety. I felt the blood pound in my ears. Dementia. Aggressive. She was burying me before I was even dead. She was painting a picture of a drooling invalid to explain why I wasn't there to defend my property. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I looked at the code scrolling on my left monitor. My mind was sharper than hers would ever be. Does he have any say in the sale? Julian asked. He seemed cautious. Sharks know when there is blood in the water, but they also know when there is a trap. None, Tiffany said, waving her hand dismissively. The power of attorney is ironclad. He signed everything over last week. Honestly, he was relieved. He just wants to rest. He doesn't want the burden of this place anymore. He actually told me, Tiffany paused for dramatic effect. He told me he wants us to sell it so we can live our lives to the fullest. That is his dying wish. A dying wish. I let out a dry laugh that sounded loud in the empty room. My wish was to see you in handcuffs, Tiffany. I looked at Derek. He was standing a few feet away, listening. He looked at his shoes. He heard his wife tell a stranger that his father was a vegetable, and he said nothing. He didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just swallowed his scotch and his pride. Okay, I whispered. You want to play with the house. Let's see if the house wants to play with you. I moved my mouse to the control panel on the left screen. This was the interface for the proprietary smart home system I had coded myself. I called it the Hawk's Nest. It controlled everything from the HVAC to the lighting zones to the audio distribution. Let's start with the atmosphere, I said. I clicked on the climate control tab. The current temperature in the great room was a comfortable 72 degrees. I dragged the slider down, way down, 60 degrees, then 55, then 50. I watched the screen. It would take a few minutes for the industrial chillers to kick in, but when they did, they would feel it. Next, I went to the lighting tab. The chandeliers were set to a warm, inviting amber glow. I selected the preset I used to use for testing the bulbs. I called it the strobe, but I slowed it down. I didn't want a disco. I wanted a haunting. I set the lights to dim by 30% every 10 seconds, then flare back up to full brightness for a millisecond. Just a flicker. Just enough to make you think you were seeing things. On the screen, I saw the first reaction. A woman in a silver dress rubbed her arms. She looked up at the vent. The air conditioning had kicked on, and it was blowing Arctic air directly into the party. Julian frowned. Is it getting cold in here? He asked. Tiffany laughed nervously. Oh, it is just a draft. Old houses, you know. They have their quirks. Derek, honey, go check the thermostat. Derek walked over to the wall unit. I watched him press the buttons. Up, up, up. Nothing happened. I had locked out the local controls. It says it is set to 72, Derek called out, but it feels like 40. That is odd, Tiffany said. Her smile was starting to crack at the edges. Just put another log on the fire. I waited until she turned back to Julian. She was trying to recover the momentum. So about the closing date, she said. We were hoping to expedite it. If we can get the wire transfer initiated tonight, we can hand over the keys immediately. I moved my mouse to the audio tab. The string quartet was taking a break. Soft jazz was playing through the hidden speakers. I opened my library of sound files. I have a folder of audio I used to use to scare off intruders when the house was vacant. Sounds of heavy footsteps, sounds of doors slamming, and a recording of my own voice. I selected the track labeled System Failure. I didn't play it loudly. I played it just under the threshold of the music. A low hum, a vibration that you feel in your teeth more than you hear with your ears. Julian stopped drinking. Do you hear that? He asked. Hear what? Tiffany asked. She was shivering now. The cold was setting in. "That sound," Julian said. "It sounds like electrical arcing." I smiled. That was exactly what it sounded like. I ramped up the lighting effect. The chandelier flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went dark for a full 3 seconds before blazing back to life. The guests gasped. The string quartet stopped tuning their instruments. Tiffany laughed, but it sounded high and frightened. "Just a power surge," she said. "The grid out here is unreliable in the winter. It adds to the charm, don't you think?" Rustic living. Julian was not looking charmed. He was looking at the ceiling. "I don't like electrical issues," he said. "Rewiring a place like this costs a fortune." "I was told the systems were updated." "They were," Tiffany insisted. "My father-in-law was obsessed with—" She was cut off by a loud pop from the speakers. Then silence. The music died. Then my voice came through. It wasn't a live feed. It was a pre-recorded system alert I had programmed years ago. "Warning, unauthorized access detected. System integrity compromised." The voice boomed through the room. It sounded like the voice of God, or at least the voice of a very angry landlord. "What was that?" Julian asked, stepping back. "Who is unauthorized?" Tiffany looked frantic. "It is nothing. It is just the alarm system glitching. Derek, fix it. Do something." Derek was frantically tapping on his phone. "I locked him out," I said to my monitor. "You cannot fix what you do not understand, son." I decided it was time for the pièce de résistance. I went to the lighting control for the exterior floodlights, the ones pointing at the lake, the ones pointing at the driveway, and the ones inside the house. I set them to a randomizer pattern. On the screen, the house went crazy. Lights flashed on and off in a chaotic rhythm. It looked like the house was having a seizure, or like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. Guests started to murmur. Some were putting down their drinks. This wasn't a charming rustic quirk. This was a haunted house. Julian put his glass down on the table. He looked at Tiffany. "You said the owner is senile," he said slowly. "Yes," Tiffany stammered. Her teeth were chattering from the cold. "You said he has no idea what is going on." "He doesn't." "Then why?" Julian pointed to the digital display on the smart wall panel. "Why does it say that?" I switched my view to camera 2, which pointed at the wall panel. I had overridden the text display. Instead of showing the temperature or the song title, it was scrolling a single message in bright red letters. "I am watching you." Tiffany turned pale. She looked like a ghost in her red dress. "Who is doing this?" she screamed. "Is this a joke? Derek, is this one of your stupid jokes?" Derek shook his head. His eyes were wide with fear. He knew. I could see it in his face. He recognized the pattern. He remembered when he was a kid, and I would flash the porch lights to call him in for dinner. He knew his father was in the machine. "It is not a joke, Tiff," Derek whispered. "It is Dad." "Don't be stupid," Tiffany snapped. "Your dad is sitting in his recliner eating cat food for all I know. He doesn't even know how to use an iPhone. How could he do this?" Julian buttoned his jacket. He looked cold, and he looked angry. "I don't know what kind of game you are playing, Mrs. Carter," he said, "but I don't do business in a circus, and I certainly don't buy properties that seem to be possessed." "No, please wait," Tiffany grabbed his arm. "It is just a technical glitch. I will call the electrician. We can sign the papers in the study. It is warmer in there." I clicked on the study lock. Click. "The study is locked," Derek said, trying the door handle. I leaned back in my chair. The chaos on the screen was beautiful. The guests were putting on their coats. The servers were looking confused. The perfect gala was unraveling, thread by thread. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the opening act. The lights and the cold were just to get their attention. Now it was time for the main event. I saw headlights on the driveway camera. A convoy of trucks, not guests. I checked the time. 10:30 p.m., right on schedule. Tiffany saw the lights through the window. Finally, she said, "That must be the caterers with the late-night dessert. Or the electrician." She ran to the front door and threw it open. But it wasn't dessert. 3 large men in coveralls walked in. They were shaking the snow off their boots. They didn't look like they were there to serve creme brulee. "Can I help you?" Tiffany asked, trying to regain her composure. "Use the service entrance, please." One of the men stepped forward. He held a clipboard. "We are here for the furniture," he said. Tiffany blinked. "Excuse me, work order 409, the man said. "Removal of all staging items. We were told the house needs to be empty by midnight." "Staging items," Tiffany screeched. "This is my furniture. This is my house. Get out." The man looked at his clipboard, then at Julian, who was watching with intense interest. "Lady, the paperwork says this property is being cleared for the new owner. We got a rush order, double time for Christmas Eve. Now are you going to move out of the way, or do we have to work around you?" "New owner?" Julian asked. "I thought I was the new owner." Tiffany looked around wildly. The lights flickered again. The room temperature dropped another degree. I sat in my dark office and took a sip of water. The trap had snapped shut. And the best part was, she still thought this was a mistake. She still thought she could talk her way out of it. She didn't realize that the ground beneath her feet had already disappeared. 10 o'clock at night is usually when parties like the one Tiffany was throwing hit their peak. The champagne has been flowing for hours, and the guests have forgotten about the cold drafts and the flickering lights because the alcohol has done its job. But at 10 o'clock exactly, I was watching my monitors, and I saw the headlights. They were not the sleek LED beams of another luxury car arriving to join the festivities. These were yellow halogen beams sitting high off the ground. They cut through the falling snow like searchlights. And then came the sound. Even through the double-paned glass of the lake house windows and the sophisticated microphone system I had installed, I could hear the rumble. It was the deep, throat-rattling growl of heavy diesel engines. I took a sip of water in my dark office and leaned closer to the screen. "Here comes the cavalry," I whispered. On the driveway camera, I saw them turn in. 3 massive moving trucks. They were not the clean, branded trucks of a high-end relocation service. These were unmarked white box trucks, the kind used for industrial cleanouts and foreclosure seizures. They looked aggressive. They looked like they meant business. They rolled past the valet stand, forcing the young kid parking cars to jump into a snowbank to avoid being crushed. They didn't stop at the guest parking. They rolled right up to the front portico, blocking the entrance completely. The lead truck hissed as its air brakes engaged. A cloud of steam rose up, obscuring the festive wreath Tiffany had hung on the door. Inside the house, the party stopped. The string quartet trailed off into a discordant squeak. The guests who were holding crystal flutes of champagne turned toward the windows. The vibration of the idling trucks was shaking the floorboards. It was shaking the expensive vases on the mantelpiece. It was shaking the very foundation of the lie Tiffany had built. I switched the camera view to the front door. Tiffany was marching out. She had thrown a fur stole over her red dress, but she was still shivering. Whether it was from the 50-degree temperature inside the house or the sheer rage boiling in her blood, I couldn't tell. She threw the front doors open and stormed down the steps into the snow. She didn't care that she was wearing stilettos. She didn't care that her guests were watching. She looked like a queen whose castle was being besieged by peasants. "Excuse me!" she screamed over the roar of the engines. "You cannot park here. This is a private event. Move these trucks immediately." The driver's side door of the lead truck opened. A man stepped down. He was a giant of a man, wearing insulated coveralls and a neon yellow safety vest. He had a beard that looked like steel wool, and he was holding a clipboard. He didn't look at Tiffany's dress. He didn't look at her furious face. He looked at the house number and then checked his paperwork. "Is this the Carter residence?" he asked. His voice was a deep baritone that carried over the wind. "Yes, this is the Carter residence," Tiffany snapped. "And I am Mrs. Carter, and I did not order any trucks. You are ruining my gala. Get out. Now." The man didn't move. He just flipped a page on his clipboard. He looked bored. He looked like a man who had heard every excuse in the book and didn't care about any of them. "I have a work order here, ma'am," he said, tapping the paper with a thick finger. "Priority extraction. Immediate removal of all non-structural assets, interior and exterior. We are on a tight schedule." "Removal!" Tiffany screeched. Her voice cracked. "What are you talking about? We are selling this house fully furnished. Nothing is being removed. Who sent you?" The man shrugged. "The paperwork just says, owner's representative. Says the property needs to be broom clean by midnight. Something about a change in usage. New owner wants a blank slate." Tiffany froze. She turned around and looked at the house. Julian Sterling, the man in the blue suit, had come out onto the porch. He was holding his drink and looking at the trucks with a frown. "Julian," Tiffany yelled, waving her arms. "Did you do this? Is this your crew? I told you we could negotiate the furniture. You didn't have to send movers in the middle of the party." Julian shook his head. He walked down the steps, carefully avoiding the ice patches. "I didn't order this, Tiffany," he said. "I haven't even bought the house yet. Why would I pay to empty a house I don't own?" Tiffany looked back at the foreman. "There is a mistake," she said. "A huge mistake. I am the owner." "Well, my husband and I represent the owner, and we did not authorize this. I am calling the police." The foreman sighed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. "Look, lady, I don't know about your husband, but this order comes from the holding company, Althea Legacy, LLC. It is signed and notarized, and it includes a writ of possession. That means if you stop us, we call the sheriff. And trust me, you don't want the sheriff out here on Christmas Eve. Now, are you going to move your guests, or do we start moving them for you?" Tiffany snatched the paper. I watched on the high-definition monitor as her eyes scanned the document. I knew exactly what she was seeing. It was a standard asset liquidation form, the kind used when a company is dissolving a branch. It authorized the removal of everything: the sofas, the paintings, the rugs, the tables, everything that wasn't nailed down. But that wasn't what made her hands shake. It was the signature at the bottom. It wasn't her forgery. It was the real deal. It was the signature of Winston Carter. She looked up at the camera. Not the security camera, but the camera in her mind. She looked around wildly, as if she expected me to jump out of the bushes. "Derek!" she screamed. "Derek! Get out here!" Derek came stumbling out of the house. He looked terrified. "What is it, Tiff?" "Your father," Tiffany hissed. She shoved the paper into his chest. "Your father did this. He sent these goons." Derek looked at the paper. He looked at the trucks. He looked at the foreman who was already signaling his crew to lower the loading ramps. The metal ramps clanged loudly against the frozen driveway. It sounded like the gates of a prison slamming shut. "He can't do this," Derek stammered. He is at home. He is confused." "He is not confused, you idiot," Tiffany yelled. She was losing it now. The facade of the sophisticated socialite was gone. She was just a desperate woman, watching her payday drive away in a box truck. "Call him. Call him right now, and tell him to call these people off. Tell him I will sue him. Tell him I will have him committed tonight." Derek pulled out his phone. His fingers were trembling so bad he dropped it in the snow. He scrambled to pick it up, wiping the screen on his expensive suit jacket. I sat in my office and watched my own phone. It was sitting on the desk right next to my mouse hand. It started to vibrate. The screen lit up. "Son" was the caller ID. I picked it up. I looked at it. I didn't slide the bar to answer. I didn't decline the call. I just let it ring. In the driveway, Derek held the phone to his ear. I could see his lips moving. "Come on, Dad, pick up. Please pick up." I took a sip of water. "I am sorry, son," I said to the empty room. "The subscriber you were trying to reach is currently busy teaching you a lesson about respect." The phone stopped ringing. It went to voicemail. "He is not answering," Derek said, looking at Tiffany with wide, panicked eyes. It went straight to voicemail. Tiffany let out a primal scream of frustration. She grabbed the phone from him and hit redial. My phone started buzzing again. I watched it dance across the mahogany surface of my desk. I imagined Tiffany's voice on the other end, shrill and demanding. I imagined her threats. I imagined her fear. She wasn't used to being ignored. She was used to getting her way. She was used to bullying Derek and manipulating me. But tonight, she was shouting into the void, and the void was sending moving trucks. The foreman had seen enough. He blew a whistle. "All right, boys, let's go," he shouted. "Start with the big pieces in the main hall. We need the floor clear in 20 minutes. The crew of movers surged forward. There were 10 of them, burly men in boots who didn't care about wet floors or spilled champagne. They marched up the steps past Julian, who stepped aside with a look of pure bewilderment, past Tiffany, who was still screaming into the phone, and into the house. I switched the camera view back to the interior. It was chaos. The movers walked right into the party. 2 of them grabbed the end of the long antique dining table where guests were still picking at appetizers. "Excuse us, folks," one of the movers said. "This piece is going on the truck, plates and all." The guests scattered like roaches when the lights turned on. A woman in pearls dropped her plate. A man in a tuxedo tried to protest, but the mover just glared at him, and he backed down. Tiffany ran back inside. "Stop it," she yelled, grabbing the arm of a mover who was lifting a heavy velvet armchair. "Put that down. That is a rental. I am responsible for that." The mover didn't even slow down. "Talk to the boss lady," he said, hoisting the chair over his head. Julian walked back inside. He looked at the scene. He looked at the flickering lights, which I had set to a chaotic strobe pattern now. He looked at the breath coming out of his mouth in the freezing air. And he looked at Tiffany, who was fighting a losing battle with a moving crew. He walked over to her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked disgusted. "Tiffany," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Not now, Julian," Tiffany snapped. "Can't you see I am handling this? It is just a misunderstanding." "It is not a misunderstanding," Julian said. "It is a fraud. You don't own this house. You don't control this house. You can't even keep the lights on in this house." "Julian, please," Tiffany begged, grabbing his lapels. "I can explain. My father-in-law is having an episode. He seems pretty lucid to me," Julian said, pulling away from her. "Lucid enough to send an eviction crew. Lucid enough to protect his assets from whatever this is." He gestured around the room. "I am leaving, Tiffany," Julian said. "Do not call me. Do not email me. And if I see my deposit check cashed, my lawyers will eat you alive." He turned and walked out. The other guests followed him. It was a mass exodus. People were grabbing their coats from the pile on the bench that the movers were about to take. They were running to their cars. They wanted to get away from the crazy woman and her freezing haunted house. Tiffany stood in the center of the great room alone. Well, not alone. Derek was there cowering in the corner, and the movers were there stripping the room bare. She looked at the camera, the security camera. She stared right into the lens. "Winston," she screamed, "I know you can hear me. I know you are doing this. You are going to pay for this. You are going to rot in hell." I leaned into my microphone. I pressed the talk button. My voice boomed through the house one last time. "Merry Christmas, Tiffany," I said. "Don't forget to lock up when you leave. Oh, wait. You won't have keys anymore." I cut the feed. I didn't need to see the rest. I knew what was coming. The emptiness, the cold, the silence. The same silence they had left me in for years. Now, they could taste it. And from the look on Tiffany's face, it tasted bitter. The clock on my computer screen hit 11 p.m. exactly. Up at the lake house, the movers were wrestling with the Steinway piano in the foyer. Tiffany was screaming at them to be careful with the finish, even though she didn't own the piano, and she certainly didn't own the house anymore. Julian Sterling was standing by the door, looking at his watch, ready to leave. Derek was sitting on the bottom step of the grand staircase with his head in his hands. It was the perfect moment. It was the moment the curtain falls. I reached out and pressed the enter key. In Wisconsin, the world ended. It didn't happen like a normal power outage. When the grid goes down, the lights usually flicker and die slowly. This was different. This was a hard kill. I had installed heavy-duty industrial relays in the main distribution panel. When they tripped, they made a sound like a gunshot. Ka-chunk. The sound echoed through the great hall. And then instant, absolute darkness. The crystal chandeliers died. The recessed lighting died. The exterior floodlights that were illuminating the snowstorm died. Even the little green LEDs on the smoke detectors blinked out. I had cut the battery backups too. The only light came from the flashlight beams on the helmets of the movers, who didn't even pause in their work. They were pros. They expected this. To them, this was just a job site that had lost power. But to Tiffany, it was the apocalypse. I heard her scream. It was a high, thin sound that got swallowed by the darkness. "What happened?" she shrieked. "Derek, pay the bill. I told you to pay the electric bill." I sat in my office in Chicago, watching the infrared feed from the security cameras. The infrared doesn't need visible light. To me, they looked like ghosts moving in a grainy green underworld. I saw Tiffany waving her phone around, trying to use the weak flashlight app. The beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating nothing but panic. Then I activated the audio override. I had placed the speakers inside the walls, behind the drywall during construction. They were high-fidelity commercial drivers, meant to fill the house with music during parties. But tonight, they were going to fill the house with judgment. I leaned into my microphone. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The system was set to maximum volume. "Merry Christmas," I said. My voice boomed through the house. It vibrated the floorboards. It rattled the windows. It sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Tiffany dropped her phone. It clattered on the hardwood. "Winston," she whispered. I paused for effect. I let the silence hang there for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time when you are standing in the dark in a house you stole. You said I was trouble, Tiffany, I continued. You told your guests I was trouble. You told my son I was trouble. Well, I decided to live up to my reputation. This is my gift to you. This is the trouble you ordered. I cut the mic. I didn't want to have a conversation. I wanted them to sit with it. Down in the foyer, Julian Sterling clicked on a flashlight of his own. It was a bright, tactical beam. He shone it not at Tiffany, but at the ceiling. Then he shone it at the walls. He walked over to the main control panel near the kitchen. He tried the switches. Nothing. He tried the thermostat. Dead screen. He turned the beam on Tiffany. She was shielding her eyes like a deer in headlights. This isn't a power outage, Julian said. His voice was calm. Dangerously calm. Of course it is, Tiffany stammered. The storm. The lines must be down. Julian shook his head. He walked over to the wall and put his ear against it. Listen, he said. Tiffany lowered her hands. What? Silence, Julian said. Absolute silence. If the power went out, the generator would have kicked on in 10 seconds. I saw the generator unit outside. It is a 20-kilowatt Kohler. It could power a hospital. Why isn't it running? Maybe it is broken, Tiffany said. Her voice was trembling. And the heating, Julian continued. Listen to the vents. The forced air system just stopped. No fans spin down. No residual airflow. And the security panel is dark. Even if the mains get cut, the security panel has its own battery. He walked closer to her. The flashlight beam was blinding. This isn't a failure, Mrs. Carter. This is a lockout. Someone just killed the brain of this house. He shone the light on Derek, who was still sitting on the stairs. Your father, Julian said. You said he was a contractor. He was, Derek whispered. He built this place. Julian nodded. He looked around the dark hall with new eyes. He wasn't looking at the decor anymore. He was looking at the infrastructure. I suspected something was wrong with the paperwork, he said. But this is structural. What do you mean? Tiffany asked. Julian walked to the center of the room. He stomped his foot on the floor. It made a solid thud. There is a sub-basement, isn't there? He asked. Derek looked up. Yeah, Dad has a workshop down there. The server room is there too, but we don't have the key. It has a steel door. Julian laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Of course it does, and let me guess. That is where the main breakers are. That is where the automation core is. He turned the light back to Tiffany. You are trying to sell me a house that you don't control, he said. You are trying to sell me a machine that is being operated by someone else. Do you know what that implies? It implies nothing, Tiffany cried. It is just a prank. A sick prank by a senile old man. Julian stepped closer. The light caught the fear in her eyes. A senile old man doesn't remote access a hardwired smart system and bypass the fail-safes, he said. A senile old man doesn't execute a synchronized shutdown of 3 independent electrical subsystems while keeping the PA system active. That requires a level of cognitive function that, frankly, Mrs. Carter, you don't seem to possess. He looked at the movers who were still carrying furniture out by the light of their headlamps. This house is a fortress, Julian said, and the commander just pulled up the drawbridge. He turned to the foreman of the moving crew. Hey, he shouted, do you have a work order for the basement? The foreman paused, holding a lamp. Nope. Order says clear first and second floors only. Basement is off limits. Restricted access. Julian nodded. Restricted access. Because that is where the evidence is. He looked at Tiffany. I think I know what is going on here, he said. You didn't just forge a signature, did you? You tried to steal a legacy. You thought, because you had the keys to the front door, you owned the building. But you don't own the building. You are just squatters in a very expensive trap. Julian pulled out his phone. I am calling my lawyer, he said. I am putting a stop payment on the deposit check I wrote this afternoon. And tomorrow morning, I am going to the county recorder's office. I want to see the original blueprints for this place. Because if your father-in-law built this place like I think he did, there are probably 10 other ways he can make your life miserable that you don't even know about yet. Tiffany lunged for him. You can't do that. We have a contract. Julian pushed her away gently but firmly. The contract is void, he said. You acted in bad faith. You misrepresented the asset. And quite frankly, you tried to sell me stolen property. That is a federal crime." He turned his flashlight off. The darkness rushed back in. "I am leaving," he said. "Good luck with the cold. It is supposed to drop to 10 below zero tonight." He walked out the front door. I watched him go on the exterior camera. He got into his Range Rover and drove away. He was smart. He knew when to fold. Now it was just Tiffany, Derek, and the movers. The temperature in the house was dropping fast. The massive windows, which provided such a beautiful view of the lake, were now just giant sheets of ice, radiating cold into the room. Tiffany stood in the dark. "Derek," she said. Her voice was small. "Do something." Derek stood up. I saw him on the infrared camera. He walked over to where she was standing. "I can't do anything, Tiff," he said. "Why not?" she demanded. "Break down the door, go to the basement, turn the power back on." "I can't," Derek said. "Why not?" "Because I don't know how," Derek said. "I never learned. Dad tried to teach me, remember? He tried to show me how the panel worked. He tried to show me the wiring. But I told him it was boring. I told him I would just hire someone if it ever broke." He laughed. A sad, broken sound. "Well, I can't hire anyone tonight, Tiff. And I can't fix it, because I am useless, just like you said." He walked away from her toward the kitchen. "Where are you going?" she screamed. "I'm going to find a flashlight," Derek said, "and maybe a bottle of whiskey, because it is going to be a long night." I sat in my office. I felt a pang of pity for my son, but pity is a luxury I couldn't afford. Not yet. He had to feel the cold. He had to understand that warmth is not a guarantee. Warmth is something you build. Warmth is something you maintain. And if you let the fire go out, you have to be the one to relight it. I watched the movers carry out the last of the sofas. The great room was empty now, just a big, cold cavern. Tiffany sank down onto the floor. She pulled her fur coat tight around her. She was shivering violently. I checked the internal sensors. 48 degrees and falling. I opened a new can of peaches. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. 20 midnight is usually when Cinderella loses her carriage and turns back into a servant. But in my family, the clock strikes 12, and the pumpkin turns into a wrecking ball. I was sitting in my study in Chicago, wearing the navy blue suit that Althea bought me for our 40th anniversary. It is a good suit, Italian wool, tailored to fit a man who works with his hands but knows how to clean up. I had polished my shoes. I had trimmed my beard. I looked like the CEO of a company that built the skyline, not the confused old man my daughter-in-law described to her friends. In front of me sat a camera crew from Fox 32 Chicago. They had been there for an hour setting up the lights and checking the audio levels. I had called them at the same time I called the movers. You see, the media loves a story about a senile old man losing his mind. But they love a story about a generous philanthropist giving away a fortune on Christmas Eve, even more. It is catnip for the ratings. I imagined the scene up at the lake house. By now, the temperature inside would be matching the temperature outside. Tiffany and Derek would be sitting on the floor of the empty great room, wrapped in whatever coats they hadn't checked at the door. The silence would be deafening. No music, no laughter, just the wind howling off the lake and the sound of their own regrets. Then right on cue, at 1 minute past midnight, my son's phone rang. I know this because I was still monitoring the security audio feed through my earpiece. The battery in the security panel was dying, but it had just enough juice for me to hear this one last conversation. It was Derek's best friend, Kyle. Kyle is a stockbroker who thinks loud noises are a personality trait. Derek picked up. "Hello?" His voice was shaking. "Dude," Kyle screamed through the phone. "Dude, are you watching this?" "Watching what?" Derek asked. His teeth were chattering. "We have no power, Kyle. We are freezing to death." "Turn on your phone, man," Kyle yelled. "Go to the Fox News live stream, right now. Your dad is on TV. He is the lead story." I heard the fumble of hands. I heard Tiffany scream, "Give me that." I heard the tap, tap, tap of fingers on a glass screen. And then I heard my own voice coming through their tiny phone speaker, delayed by a few seconds. I looked into the lens of the camera in my study. I didn't smile. I looked solemn. I looked dignified. "Mr. Carter," the news anchor asked me, "this is an incredible gesture. A $10 million estate given away in the blink of an eye. What prompted this decision?" I leaned forward in my leather chair. I looked straight down the barrel of the camera. I knew that 300 miles away in a dark, freezing room, my son and his wife were staring at my face on a 5-inch screen. "Well, Susan," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "Christmas is a time for reflection. It is a time to take stock of what is heavy in your life and what is light." I looked at my assets. I looked at that beautiful house on the lake, and I realized it had become heavy. It was full of memories, but it was empty of spirit. I paused. I let that sink in. You see, I continued. I built that house for a family. I built it for laughter and for love and for children running down the halls. But lately it has become a place of exclusion, a place where people are judged by their bank accounts and not their character, a place where a father is told he is not welcome because he doesn't fit the aesthetic. I saw the anchor's eyes widen. She sensed the drama. "Are you saying your family didn't want the house?" I asked. "Oh, they wanted the house," I said. "They wanted the wood and the stone and the view. But they didn't want the values that built it. They thought the house was a trophy. But a home isn't a trophy, Susan. It is a responsibility." I took a breath. This was the part where I twisted the knife. So I decided to give it to people who understand responsibility. Tonight I signed the deed over to the Illinois and Wisconsin Veterans Alliance. Starting tomorrow morning, that house will no longer be a vacation spot for the privileged. It will be a rehabilitation center for wounded warriors, men and women who have sacrificed everything for this country. The anchor beamed. "That is beautiful, Mr. Carter. And what about your son and daughter-in-law? We understand they were staying at the property." I smiled then, a small, sad smile. "My son and his wife are young," I said. "They are capable. They have their health. They have their own careers. I would never want to burden them with the upkeep of such a massive property. In fact, my daughter-in-law told me just recently that I was trouble. She said I was a burden. So I decided to remove the burden. I am setting them free. They don't have to worry about the lake house anymore. They don't have to worry about the maintenance or the taxes or the pesky old man sitting in the corner. They are free to make their own way in the world, starting from scratch." I heard a scream from the audio feed in my ear. It was Tiffany. "No," she shrieked. "No, he can't do this. That is my house. I have a buyer. I have a contract." I ignored the voice in my ear and focused on the camera. I named the center the Althea Carter Home for Heroes, I said, softy, after my late wife. She always said that if you have more than you need, you build a longer table, not a higher fence. Well, tonight, I built the longest table in the state. The interview was wrapping up. The anchor was tearing up. "Thank you, Winston," she said. "You are a true local hero." The red light on the camera went off. The crew started to pack up, but I stayed in my chair. I listened to the aftermath playing out in Wisconsin. "He gave it away," Tiffany was screaming. She sounded like an animal caught in a trap. "He gave it to the veterans. We can't sue the veterans, Derek. We will look like monsters." Derek wasn't screaming. He was quiet. "He said he is setting us free," Derek whispered. "He is ruining us," Tiffany yelled. "Do you know what this means? I spent the deposit. I put a down payment on the condo in the city. I maxed out the cards for this party. If we don't sell this house, we are bankrupt. We are homeless, Derek." Derek laughed. It was a hysterical, broken sound. "We are not homeless, Tiff," he said. "We have your parents." "I would rather die than live with my mother," Tiffany spat. "Then we have nothing," Derek said. I took the earpiece out. I didn't need to hear any more. The silence I had gifted them was about to be filled with a lot of noise. Lawyers, creditors, the media. I stood up and shook the hand of the cameraman. "Good segment, sir," he said. "That was powerful stuff. Your kids must be proud." I looked at the young man. He was about Derek's age. He had grease under his fingernails, and he looked tired, like he had been working a double shift. "I hope they learn to be," I said. I walked the crew to the door. When they left, I locked the deadbolt. I walked back to the kitchen. The can of peaches was empty. The house was quiet, but then my phone rang again. It wasn't Derek. It wasn't a friend. It was Tiffany. I looked at the screen. I could picture her huddling in the dark, her makeup smeared, tears freezing on her cheeks, her perfect life lying in shards around her expensive heels. I answered. "Hello, Tiffany," I said. My voice was calm, warm, even. "You monster," she hissed. "How could you? How could you do this to us? To your own son?" "I didn't do anything to you, Tiffany," I said. I simply gave you what you asked for. You wanted me gone. I am gone. You wanted the house to be sold. It is gone. You wanted to be a boss. Well, now is your chance. You are the boss of your own destiny. No safety net, no handouts, no old man to bail you out. Winston, please, she sobbed. Her anger was breaking into desperation. We are freezing. The cars are locked in the garage. The gate won't open. We can't leave. Oh, that, I said. Yes, the security system goes into lockdown when the ownership transfers. It is a safety feature, to prevent looting. Looting, she screamed. We are not looters. Aren't you? I asked. You tried to sell a house you didn't own. You tried to lock away a man you didn't respect. You tried to strip the copper out of the walls of this family. That sounds like looting to me. Winston, please, she begged. Just turn the power back on. Just let us leave. We will go. We will never bother you again. I looked at the clock. It was 12:30. I can't, Tiffany, I said. I don't own the house anymore. It belongs to the veterans now. And I don't have the authorization to unlock the doors for trespassers. You might want to call the sheriff. I am sure he can come and let you out. Of course, he might have some questions about why you are inside a government-owned facility in the middle of the night. You wouldn't, she whispered. I didn't say anything. Winston, Dad, please. It was Derek. He must have grabbed the phone. Dad, I am sorry. I should have stood up for you. I was weak. Yes, you were, son, I said. And weakness is expensive. Tonight you are paying the bill. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights of Chicago. I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy weight of the secret was gone. The burden of trying to buy their love was gone. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. I was free. And as I watched the snow fall, covering the city in a blanket of white, I knew that up north the snow was falling too, covering the tracks of the people who used to be my family. Merry Christmas, Althea, I whispered. The fire is out, but the legacy is safe. The red light on the television camera clicked on. It was a small, unblinking eye staring right into my soul. I sat in my high-backed leather chair in my study, surrounded by the books I have read and the blueprints I have drawn over a lifetime of hard work. I was not nervous. When you have negotiated with union leaders in the freezing rain and stared down corrupt city inspectors trying to shake you down for a bribe, a television interview is nothing. It is just a conversation with a lens. But I knew this wasn't just an interview. This was a demolition, and I was the one pressing the plunger. The reporter, Susan, looked at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. She had done her research in the last hour. She had dug into the public records and realized that Winston Carter wasn't just a retired laborer. She had found the patents. She had found the shell companies. She realized she was sitting across from the man who practically built the underground infrastructure of Chicago. We are live in 3, 2, 1, she said quietly. Good evening, Chicago, she said, turning to the camera with her practiced news anchor smile. We are interrupting your Christmas Eve programming with a breaking story that is warming hearts across the city, and frankly, stunning the real estate world. I am sitting here with Mr. Winston Carter, a man known in construction circles as the Hawk. Tonight, Mr. Carter has made an announcement that will change the lives of hundreds of veterans. She turned to me. Mr. Carter, can you tell us what you have done with your estate on Lake Geneva? The one valued at over $10 million. I leaned forward. I clasped my hands together. They are big hands, calloused hands, hands that tell the truth. Well, Susan, I said, keeping my voice low and steady, I spent 40 years building things. I built tunnels. I built foundations. I built bridges. But the most important thing a man can build is a legacy. I bought that land in Wisconsin 30 years ago when it was just dirt and trees. My wife Althea and I cleared it ourselves. We built that house log by log. We meant for it to be a sanctuary. I paused. I looked directly into the lens. I visualized Tiffany sitting in that freezing dark room, staring at her phone screen. I visualized Derek huddled next to her. But a sanctuary has to be earned, I continued. Lately I have realized that the house was becoming a symbol of something else. It was becoming a symbol of entitlement. It was becoming a place where people went to hide from the world to pretend they were better than others, just because they had a view of the water. Susan nodded, encouraging me to go on. So I decided to repurpose the asset, I said. Tonight I signed the final deed of transfer. I have donated the entire property, the land, the main house, the guest cabins, and the boathouse, to the National Association of Black Veterans. Susan gasped. It was genuine. The entire estate, she asked. Every square inch, I said. Starting tomorrow, it will be known as the Althea Carter Center for Rehabilitation. It will be a place where men and women who have served this country can go to heal. Physical therapy, mental health counseling, job training. It will be a place where people who have actually fought for their freedom can find some peace. It won't be a place for parties anymore. It will be a place for purpose. I saw the cameraman wipe his eye. That is incredibly generous, Mr. Carter, Susan said. But I have to ask. A property of that magnitude usually stays in the family. We understand you have a son, Derek Carter, and a daughter-in-law, Tiffany Carter, who is a prominent real estate agent in the city. In fact, there are reports that they are currently at the property hosting a gala. Here it was, the question, the trap I had set for myself. Susan leaned in. What does your family think of this decision? Did you consult them? Are they on board with donating their inheritance? I sat back in my chair. I let a small, sad smile play on my lips. It was the smile of a father who has tried everything and has nothing left but the truth. My family, I said softly. I looked at the camera lens as if it were Derek's eyes. My family is very busy, Susan. You see, they live a very fast life. They are concerned with image, with status, with the price of things. I tried to talk to them. I tried to explain that value isn't a number on a Zillow listing, but we speak different languages. I took a breath. My daughter-in-law Tiffany actually told me recently that I was trouble. Susan blinked. She called you trouble? Yes, I said. She told me I was a burden. She told me I didn't fit in with her aesthetic. She told me I was an embarrassment because I wear flannel shirts and drive an old truck. She said I was just a grumpy old man who was in the way of her progress. I shrugged. So I listened to her. I decided to stop being a burden. I decided to remove myself from the equation. If I am trouble, then I should not be weighing them down with the responsibility of a $10 million estate. That is a lot of upkeep, Susan. It takes a lot of work. And my son and his wife, well, they prefer the finished product. They don't like the work. I leaned in closer to the camera. So to answer your question, Susan, no, they don't know yet. Or maybe they are finding out right now. But honestly, I don't think they mind. They are at the house right now having a big party. I am sure they are drinking expensive champagne and laughing with their important friends. They don't have time to worry about what an old man does with his property. They are too busy being important. I paused for the kill shot. Besides, I said, I am just trouble, and tonight I took the trouble away. I set them free. Now they can make it on their own, without my shadow hanging over them. It is the greatest gift a father can give, independence. Susan was silent for a moment. The studio was silent. The power of the words hung in the air like smoke. Mr. Carter, she said, finally her voice thick with emotion. That is a lesson many of us could learn from. Thank you for your generosity to our veterans. And Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Susan, I said. The red light turned off. The cameraman let out a low whistle. Man, he said, stepping out from behind the tripod. That was cold. That was ice cold. But in a good way. My brother is a Marine. He did 2 tours in Iraq. He came back messed up. A place like that. Man, thank you. He reached out and shook my hand. His grip was firm. I stood up. My knees popped, but I felt strong. I walked the crew to the door. When they left, I locked the deadbolt and walked back to my desk. I turned on my computer monitor. The live stream from the news station was on a delay, so I watched myself say those words again. I am just trouble. I looked at the other monitor, the one connected to the security cameras at the lake house. The infrared feed showed the great room. It was empty of furniture now. The movers had done their job. The only things left were 2 figures sitting on the floor in the center of the vast, empty space. Tiffany and Derek. They weren't moving. They were just sitting there in the dark, illuminated by the ghostly green glow of the night vision camera. The blue light from their phone had gone out. Maybe the battery died. Maybe they just turned it off because they couldn't bear to watch anymore. I zoomed in. Tiffany had her head on her knees. She was rocking back and forth. I couldn't hear her anymore because I had cut the audio, but I knew she was crying. Not tears of sorrow, tears of rage. Tears of a narcissist who has just been unmasked in front of the entire world. She knew what that interview meant. It wasn't just about the house, it was about her reputation. I had just gone on national television and painted her as a shallow, ungrateful brat who abandoned her veteran-supporting father-in-law to party. Her real estate career was over. Who would trust her now? Who would list a home with the woman who tried to steal from a hero? And Derek. He was staring up at the ceiling. He looked like he was praying, or maybe he was just realizing how high the ceiling was, now that he knew he would never stand under it again. My phone started to buzz again. I picked it up. It wasn't them. It was a text from an old friend, a guy I used to work with on the tunnel project back in the 80s. Just saw you on TV, Hawk, you crazy son of a gun. Always said you were dangerous when you were quiet. Merry Christmas. Then another text, from the president of the Veterans Alliance. Winston, I am in tears. We are mobilizing a team to get up there tomorrow to secure the property. Thank you, brother. Then another, and another. My phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. The city was waking up. The story was spreading. Social media would be on fire by now. I could only imagine the comments section. The internet loves justice, and they hate bullies. I looked at the image of my son one last time. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a deep, heavy resolution. It was like finishing a building. You pour the concrete, you weld the steel, you inspect the welds, and then you walk away. You don't look back. You just know it will stand. I had built a new foundation tonight, not for Derek, but for the men and women who deserved it. And as for Derek and Tiffany, they were about to learn the most important lesson of construction. You cannot build a life on a foundation of lies. Eventually the ground shifts, eventually the cracks show, and eventually the whole thing comes down. I turned off the monitor. The screen went black. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself one last glass of bourbon. I raised it to the empty room. To trouble, I said, and I drank it down. It burned, but it was a good burn. The burn of truth. The silence in my Chicago study was heavy, but it was the good kind of heavy. It was the weight of a job finished. The weight of a structural beam that has been set perfectly in place. But up in Wisconsin, the silence was about to be shattered. I watched the infrared monitor. The great room was a cavern of shadows. Tiffany and Derek were still sitting on the floor, huddled together for warmth, like two castaways on a frozen island. They thought the worst was over. They thought the humiliation of the moving trucks and the cold was the bottom of the pit. But they forgot one thing. When you dig a hole of lies, there is no bottom. There is only deeper darkness. I saw movement on the driveway camera. It was Julian Sterling. I had watched him drive away 20 minutes ago, but now he was walking back toward the house. He was stomping through the snow, his expensive Italian loafers sinking deep into the drifts. He looked furious. He looked like a man who wanted to kill something. I realized what had happened. When I triggered the security lockdown, I didn't just lock the doors of the house. I locked the perimeter gate. The massive wrought iron gates at the end of the long driveway were deadlocked. Julian had driven down there, only to find himself trapped inside the property. He must have sat in his car trying to call for help, and that is when he saw it. That is when he saw the notification on his phone, the breaking news alert, the interview with the old man he thought was senile. He kicked the front door open. It wasn't locked because the electronic latch had failed in the open position when the power died. But the heavy wood slammed against the wall with a violence that made Derek jump. Tiffany scrambled to her feet. "Julian," she cried. "Thank God. You came back. Did you call someone? Can you get us out of here?" Julian didn't answer. He walked across the room. In the green glow of the night vision camera, he looked like a demon. He didn't have a flashlight this time. He was navigating by the light of his cell phone screen, which he held out in front of him like a weapon. He stopped 2 feet from Tiffany. He didn't look at her shivering body. He didn't look at her tear-stained face. He just held up the phone. On the screen, I could see the replay of my interview. I could see my own face, calm and resolved, telling the world that the house now belonged to the veterans. "Did you know?" Julian asked. His voice was a low growl. Tiffany stared at the phone. "No," she whispered. "I didn't know. He is crazy, Julian. He did this to spite me." Julian lowered the phone. He took a step closer. The air in the room was freezing, but the heat coming off of him was palpable. "You took my deposit check," he said. $500,000. You took it this afternoon. You cashed it via mobile deposit. I got the notification from my bank. "I can explain," Tiffany stammered. "It is a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I will get the lawyers. We will sue him for competency. Fix it, Julian laughed. It was a terrifying sound. You cannot fix this. Do you know what I just watched? I watched the owner of this property, the real owner, donate it to a charity on live national television. Do you know what that makes you? It doesn't make you a victim, Tiffany. It makes you a fraudster. You sold me a building that you knew you didn't have the right to sell. You took $500,000 from me for a property that now belongs to the United States government. It is my house, Tiffany screamed, losing control. It is my inheritance. It is a crime scene, Julian roared. And then he did something I didn't expect. He was a man of suits and boardrooms, a man of subtle threats and legal maneuvers. But tonight the veneer of civilization cracked. He reached out and slapped her. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a backhand swing that echoed through the empty house like a pistol shot. Tiffany spun around and fell to the hard floor. She didn't scream. She was too shocked. She just lay there, holding her cheek, staring up at him in disbelief. Derek stood up, but he didn't move forward. He shrank back into the shadows, terrified of the man in the blue suit. "You are going to jail," Julian spat, looking down at her. "And I am going to be the one testifying against you. I am going to sue you for the deposit. I am going to sue you for damages. I am going to sue you for the time I wasted standing in this freezing house. You are finished in this town, Tiffany. You are radioactive. No one will ever list a property with you again. No one will ever buy from you. You are a joke." He turned to leave, but he stopped. He looked at the front door. "And now," he said, his voice shaking with rage, "now I am trapped here, with you, because your crazy father-in-law locked the gate." He didn't have to wait long. I looked at the external camera view. Flashing blue and red lights were painting the snow-covered trees in a rhythmic dance. One car, then two, then three. It looked like a parade. Saul Rosenbaum doesn't do things by halves. When I told him to call the authorities, I didn't mean the local village constable. I meant the county sheriff. And because the property was now technically a veterans facility, he had probably alerted the federal liaison as well. The sirens were cut, but the lights were blinding. The cruisers skidded to a halt behind the moving trucks that had already departed. Doors opened. Uniformed officers stepped out. They had their hands on their holsters. They weren't approaching a noise complaint. They were approaching a felony in progress. Inside the house, Julian saw the lights. Finally, he said, "The police. I'm going to have you arrested right now." He walked to the door and threw his hands up. "Officer," he shouted. "In here." "I am the victim here." 4 deputies walked in. Their flashlights cut through the gloom, crisscrossing the empty room. "Hands where we can see them," a deputy shouted. Julian froze. "Wait, I am Julian Sterling. I am a developer. I was the buyer." "Hands on your head," the deputy barked. Julian complied, slowly, his face twisting in confusion. Tiffany stood up. She tried to smooth her dress. She tried to summon the ghost of her arrogance. "Officers," she said, stepping forward. "Thank God you are here. My father-in-law has gone insane. He locked us in. He cut the power. I want to file a report." The lead deputy, a tall man with a mustache that looked like a push broom, walked right past Julian and shone his light directly into Tiffany's face. "Are you Tiffany Carter?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I am. And this is my husband Derek. We are the owners." The deputy pulled a piece of paper from his jacket. "Mrs. Carter, I have a digital warrant here issued by the district judge regarding a complaint from the Althea Legacy Trust and the Wisconsin Veterans Alliance." "A warrant?" Tiffany blinked. "For what?" "For criminal trespass to property, fraudulent conversion of funds, and elder abuse," the deputy read. Tiffany's mouth fell open. "Elder abuse? We have a sworn affidavit from a Mr. Winston Carter stating that you attempted to force him to sign documents under duress, and that you are currently occupying a property that has been legally transferred to a charitable organization. The new owners have requested immediate removal of all unauthorized persons." "That is a lie," Tiffany shrieked. "It is my house." "Ma'am," the deputy said, his voice hardening, "according to the county recorder, as of 5 p.m. today, this house belongs to the Veterans Alliance. You have no lease. You have no deed. You are trespassing on private property. And given the amount of money involved in this alleged sale, we are taking you into custody for questioning regarding the fraud charges." He reached for his belt. The sound of handcuffs clicking open was loud in the silent room. Tiffany backed away. No, you can't. Derek, tell them. Tell them it is our house. Derek stepped into the light. He looked at the police. He looked at his wife. He looked at the red mark on her cheek where Julian had hit her. He looked so tired, I thought, watching from my screen. It is not our house, Derek said softly. What? Tiffany screamed, turning on him. It never was, Tiff, Derek said. Dad built it. Dad paid for it. We just stayed here. The deputy grabbed Tiffany's wrist. She tried to pull away, scratching at his arm. Don't touch me, she yelled. Do you know who I am? I am a top producer. I have thousands of followers. Stop resisting or I will add assaulting an officer to the list, the deputy warned, spinning her around. He clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. I sat in my office and took a deep breath. I had waited years for this moment. I thought it would feel like victory, but it didn't. It felt like surgery. Necessary, painful, but essential to cut out the rot. They marched her out. She was still screaming, kicking at the snow, her high heels slipping on the ice. They put her in the back of the cruiser. It was a cage, just like the one she wanted to put me in. Derek walked out behind them. He wasn't handcuffed. The deputy spoke to him quietly. Mr. Carter, you are free to go for now, pending further investigation, but you need to vacate the premises immediately. Do you have a vehicle? My car is in the garage, Derek said, pointing to the detached garage. But the doors are locked. The system won't open them. Then you will have to find another way home, the deputy said. You cannot stay here. This is a secured site. Derek stood in the driveway. The wind was whipping his suit jacket. He looked at the police cars pulling away with his wife inside. He looked at Julian Sterling, who was giving a statement to another officer, waving his arms and pointing at the house. Derek looked up at the security camera. He knew I was there. He knew I was watching. He didn't look angry. He just looked lost. I reached for the mouse. I could open the garage door. I could let him get his car. I could let him drive home in a warm seat with heated leather. My finger hovered over the button. I thought about the times I picked him up when he fell. I thought about the tuition checks, the down payments, the bailouts. Every time I helped him, I made him weaker. Every time I shielded him from the cold, I made him more vulnerable to the frost. I took my hand off the mouse. No, son, I whispered. Not tonight. Tonight you walk. I watched him stand there for a minute longer. Then he turned up his collar, shoved his hands into his pockets, and started walking down the long, dark driveway toward the main road. It was 5 miles to the nearest town. It was snowing. It was 10 degrees. He would be cold. He would be miserable. But he would survive. And maybe, just maybe, with every step he took in the freezing dark, he would start to remember who he was, before he forgot where he came from. I turned off the monitor. The green glow faded. My office was dark again. I picked up the phone and dialed Rosenbaum. It is done, I said. Good, Saul said. The press is going wild, Winston. You are a hero. I am not a hero, Saul, I said, rubbing my eyes. I am just a father who had to use tough love. Tough love? Saul snorted. That wasn't tough love, Winston. That was a surgical strike. Whatever you call it, I said. It is over. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city, covering the tracks, covering the mistakes. Tomorrow, I would start the paperwork for the rehab center. Tomorrow, I would hire the architects. Tomorrow, I would build something new. But for tonight, I was going to sleep. For the first time in 5 years, I was going to sleep without worrying about my legacy. It was safe. It was gone. And in being gone, it was finally safe. The phone on my desk vibrated against the mahogany. It was a low buzzing sound, like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I looked at the caller ID. It said, son. Just that one word. Son. It is a heavy word. It carries the weight of diapers changed, and scraped knees bandaged, and tuition checks written, and sleepless nights spent wondering if you did a good job. But tonight, that word felt different. It felt like an accusation. I let it ring 3 times. One for the Father, one for the Son, and one for the Holy Ghost, who was the only witness to the tragedy that had just unfolded. I picked up the phone and pressed the green button. I didn't say hello. I just held the device to my ear and waited. Dad. The scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It wasn't a cry of concern. It wasn't a cry of relief that I was okay. It was the shriek of a man watching his bank account evaporate. Dad, are you crazy? What the hell did you do? I sat back in my leather chair. I took a slow sip of the bourbon that was resting in my other hand. The liquid was amber and warm, a stark contrast to the freezing cold voice on the other end of the line. I am not crazy, Derek, I said calmly. I am actually quite lucid. I just gave an interview. Did you see it? I thought I was very articulate. Articulate? Derek screamed. His voice cracked. I could hear the wind howling in the background. I could hear the crunch of snow under his feet. He was outside. He was alone. You gave the house away, Dad. You gave the lake house to a bunch of strangers. You went on national television and humiliated us. Tiffany is in a police car. Do you hear me? They are taking her away in handcuffs. I closed my eyes. I pictured Tiffany in the back of the cruiser. I pictured the look on her face when the realization hit her that her Instagram followers couldn't bail her out. She broke the law, son, I said. She tried to sell property that didn't belong to her. That is called fraud. Actions have consequences. You of all people should know that. I taught you that when you were 6 years old and you broke the neighbor's window. This isn't a window, Derek yelled. This is $10 million. $10 million, Dad. That was our money. That was my future. How could you do this to me? I sat up straight. The chair creaked. That was the sentence I was waiting for. That was the confession. Your money, I asked. My voice dropped an octave. It became the voice of the hawk, the voice that used to make foremen tremble on the job site. Yes, my money, Derek shouted. I am your son. I am your only heir. That house was supposed to be mine eventually. You just burned my inheritance. You are sick. You are a sick old man. I took a deep breath. The air in my study smelled of old paper and dust. It smelled of history. Listen to me very carefully, Derek, I said, and I want you to listen with both ears, because I am only going to say this once. I paused. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. I could hear the panic rattling in his chest. Is your name on the deed? I asked. What? Derek sputtered. Is your name on the deed? I repeated slowly. Did you buy the land? Did you clear the trees? Did you pour the concrete for the foundation? Did you frame the walls? Did you pay the taxes for 30 years? No, but nothing. I cut him off. That house was never yours. It belonged to the Althea Legacy, LLC. Do you know why I named it that? Derek didn't answer. I named it after your mother, because she was the only one who understood what that house was for. It was for family. It was for love. It wasn't an asset on a balance sheet. It wasn't a chip in a poker game for your wife to gamble with. It is still stealing, Derek cried. You led us to believe. I led you to believe nothing, I snapped. You led yourselves to believe that you were entitled to the fruit of my labor without ever watering the tree. You looked at me and you didn't see a father. You saw a bank. You saw an ATM that was getting old and glitches. You and your wife planned to put me in a state facility, Derek. Do you think I didn't know? Do you think I didn't hear? There was silence on the line. A long, cold silence. The wind howled louder. You heard that, Derek whispered. I heard everything I said. I heard you call me a burden. I heard you agree to sell my home to pay off her credit cards. I heard you agree to lock me away in Gary, Indiana so you wouldn't have to deal with me. You broke my heart, son, but you didn't break my spirit. Dad, look. Derek's voice changed. It shifted from anger to begging. We can fix this. Just call the lawyers. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you were confused. We can get the house back. We can explain it to the press. Please, Dad. We have nothing. Tiffany spent the deposit. We are going to be ruined. I looked at the picture of Derek on my desk. He was 10 years old, holding a fish he had caught off the dock at the lake house. He looked so proud. He looked so innocent. I mourned that boy. I mourned him like he was dead, because the man on the phone wasn't him. The man on the phone was a stranger. I cannot help you, Derek, I said. The deal is done. The papers are signed. The house belongs to the veterans now. Men who actually know the meaning of duty. Men who would never leave a comrade behind, let alone their own father. You are evil, Derek spat. You are a spiteful, evil old man. Tiffany was right about you. You are trouble. I smiled, a cold, hard smile. Yes, I said, I am trouble, And tonight I removed myself from your life. Isn't that what you wanted? You wanted to be free of the trouble? Well, congratulations. You are free. You have no house to manage, no old man to visit. You are free to go out there and build your own life. Dad, wait. And Derek, I added, don't come to the house. The locks are changed here too. And don't call this number again. What do you mean? Derek sounded terrified now. Dad, you can't cut me off. I am your son. Being a son is a relationship, Derek, I said. It is not a lifetime subscription service. You canceled your subscription the moment you signed that power of attorney. Dad, please. Goodbye, Derek. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could still hear his voice, tinny and small, screaming my name. Dad, Dad, Dad. I pressed the red button. The line went dead. The silence rushed back into the room. It was absolute. I stared at the phone screen. It showed his name and his picture. I tapped the 3 little dots in the corner of the contact card. A menu popped up. Block caller. My finger hovered over the option. It felt heavy, heavier than a sledgehammer, heavier than a sack of concrete. This was my boy. This was the child I had rocked to sleep. This was the man I had hoped would carry my name. But Althea's voice came back to me, clear as a bell. If he cannot respect the work, he does not deserve the reward. She was right. She was always right. I had enabled him for too long. I had crippled him with kindness. I had shielded him from the rain so he never learned how to build a roof. I pressed the button. Block caller. The screen flashed a confirmation. You will no longer receive calls or messages from this number. I set the phone down on the desk, face down. I walked over to the window. The snow was coming down harder now. It was a blizzard, a whiteout. It was erasing the world outside. I wondered if Derek had a hat. I wondered if he had gloves. Then I stopped myself. He is 40 years old, I said to the empty room. If he doesn't have a hat, he will have to learn to be cold. I turned off the lights in the study. I walked out into the hallway. My house felt big. It felt empty, but it felt clean. For the first time in years, the air didn't smell of deception. It smelled of lemon polish and old wood. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My knees hurt. My back hurt. I was an old man. Tiffany was right about that. I was old, but I wasn't finished. Tomorrow, I would go down to the Veterans Center. I would put on my hard hat. I would look at the blueprints. I would show them how to reinforce the foundation. I would teach a new generation of men how to build something that lasts. I lay down in my bed. The sheets were cool. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about my son. I dreamed about the lake. I dreamed about the water. Calm, still, and deep. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers reflected off the fresh snow, making the whole world look like a bruised crime scene. I watched on the monitor as the deputy escorted Tiffany and Derek out the front door of the lake house. The door did not close gently behind them. The deputy pulled it shut with a heavy, definitive thud that I could feel even though I was 300 miles away. Then came the sound of the deadbolt. Click. That was the sound of a chapter ending. That was the sound of the locks changing on their lives. Tiffany was not walking like a queen anymore. She was stumbling. The deputy had removed the handcuffs once they were outside, deciding that being stranded in a blizzard was punishment enough for the night. She was clutching her fur coat around her throat, but the wind was finding every gap. Her red dress, the one she had bought to dazzle the investors, dragged in the wet snow, leaving a trail of crimson behind her like a wound. She was screaming something at the officer, but the wind tore the words away before they could reach anyone's ears. Derek walked behind her. He had his hands jammed into the pockets of his suit pants. His shoulders were hunched up around his ears. He looked like a man who had suddenly realized he was naked. He didn't look back at the house. He couldn't. The shame was too heavy. They reached the bottom of the porch steps. The police cars started to pull away one by one, leaving tire tracks in the pristine white powder. The last deputy rolled down his window. "You two get moving," he shouted over the wind. "You can't stay on the property. We have orders to clear the site completely." Tiffany ran toward the detached garage. "My car," she yelled. "My car is in there. Just let me get my car." I had unlocked the garage door remotely 5 minutes ago. I am not a monster. I wanted them to leave. I wanted them gone. The garage door rolled up slowly, revealing Tiffany's white Mercedes G-Wagon. It sat there gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a symbol of everything she thought she was. Powerful, expensive, untouchable. Thank God, Tiffany sobbed, running toward it. She fumbled in her purse for the keys, but she never made it to the driver's door. As the police cruisers faded into the distance, another set of headlights cut through the dark. A truck backed into the driveway. It wasn't a moving truck this time. It was a tow truck, a repo truck. It had a hook on the back that looked like a scorpion's tail. A man jumped out. He was wearing a greasy parka and chewing on a toothpick. He didn't look at Tiffany. He looked at the VIN number on the Mercedes dashboard. "Hey!" Tiffany screamed. "What are you doing? Get away from my car!" The man ignored her. He walked to the back of the G-Wagon and started hooking up the chains. The metal clanking sound was sharp and brutal in the cold air. "Stop it!" Tiffany shrieked, grabbing his arm. "This is my car. I am Tiffany Carter." The man stopped and looked at her. He spat the toothpick into the snow. "Lady," he said, his voice flat and bored. "This car belongs to the bank. I got a repo order that came through at 10 p.m. Says the lease is 90 days past due and the insurance lapsed at midnight." "That is a lie," Tiffany yelled. I paid it. I paid it last week." The man pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Computer says no," he said. "Computer says you skipped the last 3 payments, and something about a secondary lien you tried to take out on the title yesterday. That flagged the system. Bank wants the asset secured immediately." He went back to work, cranking the winch. The front of the Mercedes rose into the air. It looked helpless, like a beached whale. Derek stood there watching. He didn't say a word. He knew. Of course he knew. He knew they hadn't paid the car note. He knew they hadn't paid a lot of things. He had just been pretending it would all go away once they sold the house. "Derek, do something," Tiffany screamed, hitting him on the chest. "Stop him! He's taking my car!" Derek caught her wrists. He held them tight. "It's over, Tiff," he said. His voice was dead. "Just let it go." "Let it go," she cried. "How are we supposed to get home? We're in the middle of nowhere. It is 10 below zero." The tow truck driver climbed back into his cab. He honked the horn twice, a cheerful little toot-toot that sounded like a mockery. Then he drove off, dragging the white Mercedes behind him. The car's rear tires skidded on the ice, leaving black rubber marks on the white snow. And then there were 2. Tiffany and Derek stood alone in the driveway. The wind howled through the trees. The exterior lights of the house were off. The only illumination came from the moon, which had broken through the clouds just to watch the finale. Tiffany sank down onto the snow. She didn't care about the dress anymore. She put her face in her hands and wailed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of a creature that has lost its shell. "We have to walk," Derek said. "Walk?" Tiffany looked up. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. "Walk where?" "The main road is 2 miles away. We can't stay here," Derek said, pulling her up. "If we stay here, we freeze. Come on." He started walking. He didn't wait for her. He just turned his back to the house and started trudging down the long driveway. Tiffany stumbled after him. I watched them on the perimeter cameras. It was a long walk. The snow was deep. Tiffany's high heels were useless. Every step was a struggle. She twisted her ankle once, twice, 3 times. Eventually she took the shoes off. She walked in her stocking feet in the snow. I felt a twinge of sympathy, but then I remembered the nursing home in Gary. I remembered the brochure I found in her briefcase. Sunnyside Geriatric Facility, Medicaid accepted. That place had cold floors too. That place had thin blankets too. She was just experiencing the future she had planned for me. They reached the main road after 40 minutes. They were shivering violently. Their breath came in ragged puffs of steam. There was no shelter, just a stop sign and a street lamp that buzzed and flickered. Derek pulled out his phone. His fingers were so numb he could barely tap the screen. "I am calling an Uber," he said through chattering teeth. I watched through the traffic camera mounted on the telephone pole. I have access to those too. I built the mountings for the county. I saw the light of his phone screen illuminate his face. He looked old. He looked like me. "Card declined," he whispered. "What?" Tiffany asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The credit card," Derek said. "The platinum one. It is declined." "Try the gold one," Tiffany said. "Declined. Try the debit card." Derek tapped the screen. He waited. The little spinning wheel of judgment turned. "Insufficient funds," he said. Tiffany let out a laugh, a crazy, hysterical laugh. "We are billionaires," she said. We just sold a house for $4 million. No, Derek said. We are broke, Tiff. We are completely broke. He searched his pockets. He pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. It was emergency cash. He opened the Uber app again. He switched the setting from Uber Black to Uber X. Then he switched it again to Uber Pool, the cheapest option, the option where you share the ride with strangers. It is coming, he said. 10 minutes. A Toyota Corolla. They stood there under the street lamp, waiting. 10 minutes feels like 10 years when you are standing in a blizzard in a tuxedo and an evening gown. Cars drove past them. People slowed down to look. They saw a woman in a fur coat standing next to a man in a suit, looking like refugees from a disastrous prom. Some people honked. One teenager rolled down his window and yelled something rude. Tiffany didn't even flinch. She was past caring. She was staring at the ground, watching the snow cover her toes. Finally, a dented gray car pulled up. It had a bumper sticker that said, "My other car is a broom." The driver was a heavy-set man wearing a beanie. He rolled down the window. "You Carter?" he asked. "Yeah," Derek said. "You guys look like you had a rough night," the driver said, unlocking the doors. "You have no idea," Derek said, opening the back door. They climbed in. The car was small. It smelled of stale cigarettes and fast food. The heater was blasting hot, dry air that smelled like burning dust. I watched the car pull away. It disappeared around the bend, its taillights fading into the white swirl of the storm. They had a 2-hour ride ahead of them. 2 hours in a cramped back seat. 2 hours to think. 2 hours to realize that the ride home wasn't just a trip back to the city. It was a trip back to reality. They were going back to an apartment they couldn't afford, to a mailbox full of bills they couldn't pay, to a social circle that would eat them alive as soon as the news spread. I turned away from the monitors. My work was done. I walked to the kitchen and rinsed my glass. I dried it and put it back in the cabinet, everything in its place. I thought about calling Rosenbaum to tell him they were off the property, but I knew he was asleep, and honestly, I didn't want to talk about them anymore. I was done talking. I was done teaching. I went upstairs and undressed. I hung my suit in the closet. I put on my pajamas. As I lay in the dark, I listened to the wind outside my own window. It sounded different tonight. It didn't sound like a threat anymore. It sounded like a song about resilience, a song about survival. I closed my eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw Derek's face as he sat in the back of that Uber. He looked scared, but he looked awake, finally awake. Maybe the cold will do him good, I thought, as I drifted off to sleep. Maybe the frost will kill the weeds, so something real can finally grow. Christmas morning usually smells like cinnamon rolls and pine needles, but in Chicago that year, it smelled like fresh ink and vindication. I woke up at 5 a.m., just like I have every day for the last 50 years. The hawk doesn't sleep in just because the war is over. I walked down to my kitchen in my bathrobe and brewed a pot of black coffee. The house was quiet. The phone, which I had finally taken off silent mode, was sitting on the counter. It wasn't ringing yet. The world was still waking up. But I knew that the silence was temporary. I knew that the storm I had started the night before had not dissipated. It had simply changed direction. I sat in my recliner and turned on the television. I wanted to see the morning news. I wanted to see how they were spinning the story of the crazy old man who gave away his mansion. But what I saw made me put my coffee cup down on the table with a clatter. The banner at the bottom of the screen didn't say, "Local retiree donates home." It said, "The secret billionaire next door." I leaned forward. The investigative journalist had been busy while I slept. You see, when you file a deed transfer for a $10 million property, the county clerks start looking at the names involved. And when the name is Althea Legacy LLC and the signatory is Winston Carter, they start pulling the other files. The files I had kept buried deep in the archives of the State Commerce Commission. The reporter was standing in front of the Chicago Board of Trade. He looked excited. He looked like he had just discovered a gold mine under the pavement. "We are learning more this morning about the mysterious philanthropist Winston Carter," the reporter said. "While his neighbors know him as a quiet, retired construction worker, records unsealed this morning reveal a very different story. It turns out that Mr. Carter is the holder of over 50 essential patents related to subterranean fiber optic shielding and high-voltage conduit systems. The screen flashed an image of a patent diagram I had drawn in 1982. It was the coupling system that allowed fiber cables to be laid through waterlogged soil without corroding. It was a simple design, but it was the design that made the internet possible in the Midwest. Industry experts call him the father of the underground grid, the reporter continued. Every time you send an email in Chicago or make a phone call in Milwaukee, that signal travels through infrastructure built and patented by Mr. Carter's firms. Financial analysts estimate that the royalties alone from these patents place Mr. Carter's net worth well into the 9 figures. 9 figures. I watched the number flash on the screen. It was an estimate, of course. They didn't know about the offshore accounts or the blind trusts I had set up for Althea's charities. But they were close enough. They were close enough to change everything. The reporter shook his head in disbelief. It appears that the Lake Geneva estate, valued at $4 million, was actually one of the smaller assets in Mr. Carter's portfolio. This is a man who has lived modestly in a townhouse on the south side while sitting on an empire that rivals some of the biggest names in tech. And his family apparently had no idea. I let out a low chuckle. No idea. That was the understatement of the century. Tiffany and Derek had looked at my flannel shirts and my calloused hands, and they saw a laborer. They saw a man who worked for a wage. They were so blinded by the flash of their leased luxury cars and their fake designer bags that they couldn't see the real gold. They didn't understand that true wealth doesn't shout. True wealth whispers, and I had been whispering for 40 years. The news cycle shifted then, and this was the part that I knew was coming. This was the part where the other shoe dropped. The anchor back in the studio looked serious. She shuffled some papers on her desk. In related news, she said the fallout from last night's dramatic events at the Lake Geneva property has been swift and severe for local real estate agent Tiffany Carter. My heart didn't jump. It didn't flutter. It just beat a steady rhythm of inevitability. Tiffany Carter, a senior associate at Prestige Luxury Real Estate, was taken into custody last night on charges of fraud and criminal trespass. But this morning, the consequences have escalated to her professional life. The screen cut to a statement from the CEO of Prestige Realty. He was a man I had met once at a charity dinner, a man who valued his reputation above all else. He looked angry. "We at Prestige Realty hold our agents to the highest standards of integrity," the statement read. "Effective immediately, we have terminated our relationship with Mrs. Carter. Her actions regarding the unauthorized listing of the Lake Geneva property are a direct violation of our code of ethics and state law. We are cooperating fully with the authorities, and we apologize to Mr. Winston Carter for any distress caused by our former employee." Former employee. 2 words. Just 2 words, but they carried the weight of a death sentence for a woman like Tiffany. Her entire identity was wrapped up in her job, her title, her access to the high society listings. Without that, she was just another woman with debt and a criminal record. But the news wasn't done with her yet. We have also learned, the anchor continued, that Mr. Julian Sterling, the New York developer who attempted to purchase the home last night, has filed a civil lawsuit against Tiffany Carter and her husband Derek Carter. The suit alleges fraud, misrepresentation, and theft of deposit funds totaling $500,000. Mr. Sterling's attorneys are seeking triple damages. Triple damages. $1.5 million. I did the math in my head. Tiffany and Derek didn't have $1.5 million. They didn't have $1.5 thousand. They were leveraged to the hilt. This lawsuit wouldn't just bankrupt them, it would bury them. It would garnish Derek's wages for the rest of his life. It would take whatever assets they had left. The screen showed a clip of Julian Sterling leaving the police station earlier that morning. He looked tired but vengeful. "I don't care if she is family," he told the cameras. "She looked me in the eye and sold me a lie. She took my money and tried to sell me a house that belongs to veterans. There is a special place in hell for people like that, and I intend to help her get there." I turned off the TV. The room was silent again. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I sipped my coffee. It was cold now, but I drank it anyway. I thought about the irony of it all. Tiffany had spent 5 years trying to get her hands on my money. She had manipulated Derek. She had belittled me. She had schemed and plotted to get the lake house because she thought that was the prize. She thought the $4 million house was the jackpot. If she had just been kind, if she had just been decent, if she had just welcomed me to dinner and treated me like a human being instead of a nuisance, she would have had it all. She wouldn't have just had the lake house, she would have had the empire. I would have left it all to Derek. I would have taught him how to run the licensing firm. I would have introduced him to the city planners. I would have set them up for generations. But they didn't want the responsibility. They wanted the easy way out. They wanted the fruit without tending the tree. And in their greed, they chopped the tree down, not realizing it was supporting the very roof over their heads. My phone rang. It wasn't Derek this time. I had blocked him. It was my old friend Jim, who runs the Union Pension Fund. Hawk Jim shouted, his voice booming through the speaker. "Is it true? Did you really own the patents for the underwater conduits? We always suspected you were holding out on us, but 9 figures, Hawk. Are you kidding me?" "It is just paper, Jim," I said. "It is just numbers on a screen." "It is not just numbers," Jim laughed. "It is poetic justice, man. I saw the news about your daughter-in-law. She got fired on Christmas morning. That is cold, Hawk. That is stone cold." "She fired herself, Jim," I said. "I just signed the termination papers." I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The snowplows were going by, scraping the slush off the road. I saw a young couple walking down the sidewalk holding hands. They looked poor. Their coats were thin, and they were sharing a scarf, but they were laughing. They were slipping on the ice and catching each other and laughing. I watched them until they turned the corner. Tiffany and Derek were somewhere in this city right now, probably at her parents' house, or maybe a cheap motel if her parents had refused to take them in. They were waking up to a world where they were pariahs. They were waking up to the realization that they had been sitting at a table with a king and treating him like a beggar. And the worst part for them wouldn't be the poverty. They could survive poverty. The worst part would be the knowledge of what they could have had, the knowledge that they touched the golden goose, and instead of feeding it, they tried to kill it. I went back to the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. I had things to do today. I had to meet with the Veterans Association. I had to sign the final transfer documents. I had to start planning the renovations for the rehab center. I wasn't a retired old man anymore. The world knew who I was now. I went to the closet and pulled out my coat. Not the expensive wool one, the old Carhartt work jacket, the one with the grease stains on the sleeve. The Hawk was back in business, and business was good. It was 2 days after Christmas when they finally came to my door. 2 days is a long time in Chicago when you have no money and no winter coat. I was sitting in my living room reading the morning paper. The headline on page 3 was about the lawsuit filed by Julian Sterling against a former high society real estate agent. It detailed the fraud, the deception, and the sheer audacity of the scheme. I folded the paper neatly and placed it on the coffee table. I took a sip of my chicory coffee. It was hot and bitter, just the way I like it. My phone chimed. It was the specific tone I have set for the front door security camera. Motion detected. I did not get up. I did not rush to the window. I simply picked up my iPad and tapped the notification. The screen filled with the live feed from my front porch. The image was high definition, crisp, and clear. It showed 2 people standing on my welcome mat. But if I had not known them for years, I might not have recognized them. They looked like refugees from a war that nobody else knew was happening. Tiffany was wearing a coat that was clearly too big for her. It was a men's parka, stained with grease, probably bought from a thrift store or borrowed from a stranger. Her hair, the blonde hair she used to spend hundreds of dollars a week maintaining, was matted and tucked under a cheap knit cap. She was not wearing makeup. Her face was pale, drawn, and splotchy from crying. She looked 10 years older than she had just 48 hours ago. And Derek, my son, he was wearing his suit pants, but they were wrinkled and salt-stained from walking in the slush. He had a hoodie pulled over his dress shirt. He was shivering violently, his hands jammed deep into his pockets. He looked at the camera lens, then looked away, ashamed to meet even the digital gaze of his father. I watched them for a moment. I watched the way they huddled together, not out of love, but out of shared misery. They were like 2 rats who had survived a shipwreck, only to wash up on a rocky shore. I pressed the button on the screen to activate the intercom. I did not unlock the door. I did not turn on the porch light. I just let my voice travel through the wire. "Can I help you?" I asked. My voice sounded tinny, coming out of the small speaker on the door frame, but it made them both jump. Tiffany looked up at the camera. Her eyes were wide and desperate. "Winston," she choked out. "Dad, please, open the door. It is freezing out here." "I am not your dad, Tiffany," I said calmly. "And my name is Mr. Carter. What do you want?" "We need to talk," Derek said, stepping forward. His voice was hoarse. He sounded sick. "Dad, please. We have nowhere to go. We have been sleeping at the bus station. Tiffany's parents won't answer the phone. Our cards are locked. We haven't eaten a hot meal in 2 days." I looked at my coffee cup. I looked at the warm fire crackling in my hearth. I felt a twinge of parental instinct, the urge to open the door and pull him inside and feed him soup. But then I remembered the lawyer's office. I remembered the way he looked at his shoes while his wife called me trouble. I remembered the nursing home brochure. I hardened my heart, not because I hated him, but because I loved him enough to let him bottom out. "You are grown adults," I said. "Surely you have resources. You are a top producer, Tiffany. You are a manager, Derek. Why don't you get a hotel?" "They fired me," Tiffany sobbed. She collapsed onto her knees, right there on the concrete porch. "The industry blacklisted me, Winston. Everyone knows. The news, the lawsuit. I can't even get a job showing rental apartments. They took my license, and my company put me on administrative leave without pay," Derek added, "because of the investigation into the funds. Dad, we lost everything. The condo is being foreclosed. The car is gone. We are on the street, literally on the street." I watched Tiffany kneeling on the ground. She clasped her hands together in a prayer motion. "I am sorry," she wailed. "I am so sorry, Winston. I was wrong. I was arrogant. I treated you like dirt. I know that now. Please just let us in. Just for a night. We will sleep on the floor. We will do anything. I will clean your house. I will cook for you. Please don't leave us out here." I leaned back in my recliner. I studied her face on the screen. Was she sorry? Maybe. Was she desperate? Definitely. But was she changed? No. Change doesn't happen in 2 days. Change takes time. Change takes work. Right now, she was just a predator who had lost her teeth and was looking for a soft place to heal so she could bite again. "I can't let you in," I said. "Why not?" Derek cried. "Dad, this is your house. You live here alone. You have 3 empty bedrooms. How can you be so cruel? We are your family." "Family," I repeated. "That is a funny word. You didn't treat me like family when you tried to steal my property. You didn't treat me like family when you planned to lock me away. You treated me like a liability." "We made a mistake," Derek pleaded. "We were stressed. We were in debt. We weren't thinking clearly." "You were thinking perfectly clearly," I corrected him. "You were thinking about how to extract value from an asset you deemed depreciating. That is a business decision, son. And now you are dealing with the market correction." Tiffany crawled closer to the door. She pressed her face against the wood. "Winston, please," she begged. "You are a billionaire. We saw the news. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. You could fix this with a snap of your fingers. You could pay off the lawsuit. You could get us an apartment. It would be nothing to you. Pocket change." There it was. Even in her rock-bottom moment, she was counting my money. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a bailout. She still didn't get it. She thought the problem was a lack of funds. She didn't understand that the problem was a lack of character. I pressed the talk button again. "I am afraid I can't do that," I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble. "Why?" Derek screamed, kicking the door. "Why won't you help us?" "Because I am afraid," I said. "Afraid of what?" Tiffany asked, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "I am afraid of infection," I said. They both stopped. They looked at each other, then back at the camera. "Infection?" Derek asked. "Are you sick? Do you have COVID?" "No," I said. "I am healthy. But you see, Tiffany told me something very important on Thanksgiving. She told me I was a failure. She told me I was an embarrassment. She told me I was a grumpy old man who didn't know how to live in the modern world. She said I was trouble." I paused. I let the wind howl through the speaker for a moment. "And you know what?" I continued. "I started to believe her. I am just an old man who digs holes in the ground. I am not sophisticated like you two. I don't know how to spend money on things I don't need. I don't know how to impress people I don't like. So if I let you in, I am afraid I might infect you." "Infect us with what?" Tiffany whispered. "With failure," I said. "I might infect you with the terrible disease of hard work. I might infect you with the virus of accountability. I might infect you with the plague of living within your means. And I know how much you two hate those things. You are allergic to them. If I let you in, you might accidentally catch some dignity, and I would hate to ruin your reputation as victims." Derek stared at the camera, his face twisted in a mixture of confusion and rage. "You are mocking us," he said. "We are starving, and you are making jokes." "I am not joking, son," I said. "I am dead serious. You two have spent your whole lives trying to avoid the kind of life I live. You ran from it. You looked down on it. Well, now you have a chance to build your own life. You have a blank slate. You have $0 and zero prospects. That is exactly where I started when I came to Chicago in 1968. I leaned closer to the microphone. I had a shovel and a pair of boots, Derek. That was it. Nobody opened the door for me. Nobody wrote me a check. I slept in the bus station, too. I ate out of garbage cans, too. And you know what? It made me who I am. So I am giving you a gift, I said. I am giving you the opportunity to become someone real. Go out there and find a job. Any job. Wash dishes, sweep floors, dig ditches. Earn a dollar that actually belongs to you. And once you have held that dollar in your hand, maybe then you will understand why I wouldn't let you steal mine." "Winston, please," Tiffany sobbed. Her voice was weak now. "Just a sandwich. Just a glass of water." "There is a shelter on 47th Street, I said. "It is called the Good Shepherd. I know it well. I donated the money for their new kitchen last year. They serve lunch at noon. The soup is hot and the bread is fresh. They don't ask for ID and they don't check your credit score." "You want us to go to a homeless shelter?" Derek whispered. He looked horrified. "It is good enough for the veterans you tried to rob," I said. "It should be good enough for you. Go there," I said. "Get in line. Eat with the people you used to ignore. Listen to their stories. Learn some humility. And maybe in a year or two, if you have managed to keep a job and pay your own rent, maybe then you can come back and knock on this door. But not today," I said. "Today, the Bank of Dad is closed. Permanently." I reached out to turn off the iPad. "Dad, wait!" Derek shouted. "Don't go. Please don't go." I looked at him one last time. He was my son, my flesh and blood. And because I loved him, I had to let him freeze. I had to let the winter kill the boy so the man could be born. "Goodbye, Derek," I said. I tapped the screen. The image vanished. The connection was cut. I sat there in the silence of my living room. I could still hear faint pounding on the door. It went on for a minute, then two, then it stopped. I walked to the window and peered through the curtains. I watched them walk away. They were moving slower now. They were holding on to each other for support. They were heading south toward 47th Street, toward the shelter. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than burying Althea. Harder than facing down the Union mobs. But as I watched them disappear around the corner, I felt a strange sense of peace. I hadn't saved them from the fall, but I had given them the ground. And sometimes the ground is the only place where you can find your footing. I went back to my chair and picked up my newspaper. My hands were shaking just a little. I took another sip of coffee. The article about me called me a genius, a visionary. I didn't feel like a genius. I felt like a gardener who had finally pruned the dead branches so the tree could survive. "It hurts," I whispered to the empty room. "But pain is just weakness leaving the body. And God knows they had a lot of weakness to lose. They say you can't go home again, but the truth is, sometimes you just don't want to." I sold the townhouse on the south side 3 weeks after the new year. I didn't put a sign in the yard, and I didn't list it on the internet. I just made a phone call to a young couple I knew from church. He is a carpenter, and she is a teacher, and they are expecting their first child in the spring. I sold it to them for $1. You heard me right, $1 single. I handed them the keys and told them that the only mortgage they owed was to keep the furnace running and to raise that baby with love. The look on their faces was worth more than any wire transfer from a bank. It felt good to pass the torch to hands that were actually ready to carry it. I packed 2 suitcases. I took my photo albums. I took my blueprints. And I took Althea's urn. That was all I needed. The rest of the furniture I left for the young couple. They needed a start, and I needed a finish. I moved into the Silver Oaks. Now don't let the name fool you. This isn't one of those sad places where people go to wait for the end. This is a 5-star resort that just happens to have nurses on standby. It has a heated saltwater pool. It has a library with mahogany shelves that smell like vanilla and old paper. It has a jazz lounge where a guy named Pete plays the saxophone every Tuesday night. When I first toured the place, the director tried to give me the standard sales pitch. She talked about the meal plans and the bingo nights. I let her finish, and then I asked to see the boiler room. She looked confused, but she took me down there. I looked at the piping. I looked at the electrical panels.